I call the 10th meeting of the Standing Committee on Finance to order. The orders of the day are pursuant to the order of reference of Wednesday, December 2nd, 2009, Bill C-10, an act to implement certain provisions of the budget tabled in Parliament on January 27th, 2009, and related fiscal measures. This is the clause-by-clause consideration of Bill C-10. Members, I just want to make a couple of points. We do have two legislative clerks with us if there are any requirements for expertise in terms of procedure, and I think they've been helping members through with their amendments. It's a very large bill, so it may take some time to go through. I will go through each clause, and I will ask when we come to a clause where there is a proposed amendment for the member to move the amendment, and then I will give the ruling on the amendment whether it is admissible or not. Of course, members can appeal to the committee. Also, for members' information, we do have officials here from the Department of Finance who are in the room, and if there are any questions on any particular subject, please indicate to myself, and I will call the relevant officials to the table for any information that they can provide to us. So I'm going to proceed fairly slowly, as we do have a large bill. I want to make sure we know exactly what we're doing. Just want to make sure, I hope all members have copies of the amendments and have copies of the agenda before them. And I hope they've brought their bill as well. So we'll start clause by clause consideration pursuant to Standing Order 75-1. The consideration of Clause 1 is postponed, and therefore the Chair will call Clause 2. I will just indicate to members I do not, as of yet, have any amendments for clauses between Clauses 2 and Clauses 223. I do not have any amendments. So are there any members that wish to speak to any of the clauses between 2 and 223? Mr. Mulcair.
Président, afin de faciliter des
Mr. Chairman, in order to facilitate the committee's work and not to delay things unduly, I would just like to tell you that the NDP is going to ask for a recorded vote for every clause. Thank you.
Every single clause you want a recorded vote?
Oui, Monsieur le Président.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So you want a recorded vote on all 471 clauses?
Oui, Monsieur le Président.
Okay. Okay. Shall Clause 2 carry?
Oui. Yes.
Vote par appel nominal.
A recorded vote, please.
Okay. Mr. Menzies?
Is a delay tactic such as this not votable? I mean, we watched this in the softwood lumber debate, and it was simply a ploy to slow up the process. I thought that most politicians here recognized the need to get this through. And for one member of this committee to hold up this entire committee for an opportunity to grandstand. Can we vote on this, Mr. Chair, whether this all needs to be a recorded vote?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Menzies. I do have Mr. Pichetti, and then I'll go to you, Mr. Mulcair. Mr. Pichetti.
I have no problem voting on each clause, but I think if you look at perhaps bunching them or putting them in a tighter group, I think that would probably be more conducive, and then you can just carry over the vote to the next clause like we normally do even in the House. I think if you ask consent from the committee, I think you'll, if you seek it, you shall find it.
Mr. Mulcair.
Monsieur le Président, dans le but d'accélérer nos
Mr. Chairman, in an effort to accelerate the pace of work here, I find Mr. Pichetti's suggestion to be a very good one, to group the clauses for which there are no amendments.
That was raised by Mr. Menzies, and you allowed him to speak to it, so I'll assume you're going to accord me the same privilege. Not only was Mr. Menzies' personal attack totally untoward, it was misguided. I am not going to be made to feel guilty as a member of Parliament for doing the job that I was elected to do, which is to see how Parliament spends its money. It's not our fault that your government suspended Parliament, proroguing it for 2 months. The attribution of undue intentions on our part is, of course, unparliamentary, and Mr. Menzies should apologize, but I know that he won't. But I will tell you this. We're going to do our jobs. We're going to do it with our heads held high. We think that it's scandalous that the Liberals are supporting the Conservatives on issues that take away women's rights, take away environmental protections, take away union rights, do nothing for the unemployed. So yes, we will be forcing votes on these issues because we think that the Canadian public wants to know what groups are able to stand up for them, and they'll know that the Liberal Party of Canada has completely caved and no longer represents anything in terms of principle. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I allowed Mr. Menzies to make his point as well. I would say, as the chair, I mean, if members, my understanding is if members ask for a recorded vote on each clause, that will be a recorded vote on each clause. I think, though, that my sense is that Mr. Pichetti asked that we group certain clauses together, particularly where there are no amendments put forward by any party, and my sense was that Mr. Mulcair was open to that suggestion. So, on a point of order?
No, just on the, if we're back on the motion by Mr. Mulcair, just another friendly comment, if I may. At the end of the bill, we're going to be voting on the bill in its entirety, so I think Mr. Mulcair can also make his point at that stage. So I don't think he needs to necessarily, but that is what I offer as my suggestion and my point. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Well, members are free to debate the amendments, but they're also free to make statements on any clause that they wish to make a statement on as well. So, okay. So now, I'll just, for the information of the committee, the chair does not have any amendments for between clauses 2 and clauses 223. So this. Okay, Mr. Mulcair.
I think that it would be appropriate, since this will be our first vote on the bill, to give a little bit of background on these clauses, their insertion generally into this Bill C-10, and the process that we're going through today, Mr. Chairman. Having just accepted graciously the suggestion that was made that we regroup those clauses that don't form the object of any amendment right now, it's worth bearing in mind that C-10 is the continuity of the fiscal and financial update that was brought in on the 27th of November by the Conservative government. It should be borne in mind that at the time there was a strong parliamentary reaction by all 3 opposition parties for 3 reasons. 1, the update withdrew women's rights by taking away the ability to contest issues involving equal pay for work of equal value, to contest them effectively. 2, it removed the party financing that had been put in place in the wake of the Liberal sponsorship scandal, which was, as we all know, the biggest political and corruption scandal in the history of Canadian politics. And 3, it took away union rights and the ability to bargain collectively and effectively. So those 3 subjects brought the opposition parties together, and we were ready to defeat the government. What's interesting to note, as a prologue to our discussion here today, is that of those 3 key issues, only one was solved. The budget no longer takes away the Liberals' party financing. I say the Liberals because the Liberals depend more on public financing proportionally than any of the other parties. The 2 other issues, women's rights and union rights, are still being taken away by this bill. What's fascinating to watch, and we're about to make proof of that, is that the Liberals are going to vote for it every step of the way. Now that they've gotten what they wanted for their own purposes, they're abandoning women, they're abandoning the environment, and they're abandoning social and union rights.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion of clauses between clauses 2 and 223? Okay, so we'll have a recorded vote that will apply to clauses 2 to 223.
Mr. McCallum? Abstain. Mr. McKay?
Abstain.
Mr. Pachetti?
Abstain.
Monsieur Carrier?
Against. 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 For.
Mr. Cramp? Mr. Menzies? Mr. Wallace? One, two, three, four, five, 3.
Okay, the vote is 5-3. I declare clauses 2 to 223 carried. Now, members will go now to Bloc Québécois Amendment 1. And will it be Monsieur Carrier? Now, and I will just indicate that I do have rulings on certain amendments, so I will ask at this point if the member wants to move the amendment. Does the member wish to move the amendment?
Wait. Okay.
Yes, please.
I have to give a ruling on this amendment. Bill C-10 provides for new schedules concerning weeks of benefits. The amendment BQ1 seeks to amend the bill so that Schedule 8 remains in effect after September the 11th, 2010. House of Commons Procedure and Practice states at page 655, and I quote, "An amendment must not offend the financial initiative of the Crown. An amendment is therefore inadmissible if it imposes a charge on the public treasury or if it exceeds the objects or purposes of relaxes the conditions and qualifications as expressed in the royal recommendation." End of quote. In the opinion of the chair, the amendment proposes a new scheme which seeks to alter the terms and conditions of the royal recommendation. Therefore, I rule this amendment inadmissible. And because BQ4 is consequential on BQ1, this ruling applies to it as well. So therefore, BQ1 and BQ4 are inadmissible. The chair's rulings are not debatable, but they are, members can challenge the ruling if they so choose. Monsieur Crat?
I don't want to challenge your decision, but I'd just like to see if I properly understood for clarification. You're saying it's inadmissible because of the 5 extra weeks for employment insurance would become permanent. So you're saying it's inadmissible. The advantage that would be given to workers would only be valid for a maximum 2-year period. I understand that if it would be a permanent fixture, we would need new legislation, whether it was a private member's bill or a government bill, but that within the scope of this bill, we can't make it permanent. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, you cannot make it permanent without having a royal recommendation.
Okay.
Okay. So that's BQ1.
Okay, so now the question is on clause 224.
So then the question is, shall clause 224 carry? And we want a recorded vote.
Mr. McCallum?
Yes.
Mr. McKay?
Yes.
Mr. Pachetti?
Yes.
Monsieur Carrier?
No.
No. No. No.
Monsieur Bernier?
Yes.
Mr. Decker?
Yes.
Mr. Cramp?
Yes.
Mr. Menzies?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes.
Okay. The vote is 8-3. Therefore, clause 224 is carried. Okay, BQ2. Right. So the rationale. So again, I'll ask the member if he wishes to introduce BQ2. I'll just provide a hint to my friend, Monsieur Cret or Monsieur Carrier. there may be a ruling on this as well. So does the member wish to introduce this amendment?
Oui.
Okay. The ruling, therefore, very similar. Bill C-10 provides for new schedules concerning weeks of benefits. The amendment, BQ2, seeks to amend the bill so that benefits are received following Schedule 8 after September the 11th, 2010. House of Commons Procedure and Practice states at page 655, an amendment must not offend the financial initiative of the Crown. An amendment is therefore inadmissible if it imposes a charge on the public treasury or if it exceeds the objects or purposes of relaxes the conditions and qualifications as expressed in the royal recommendation. In the opinion of the chair, the amendment proposes a new scheme which seeks to alter the terms and conditions of the royal recommendation, and therefore I rule the amendment inadmissible. Monsieur Cret.
Monsieur le Président, tantôt vous avez...
Mr. Chairman, earlier you said that BQ1 and BQ4 were covered by your first ruling. Is this one covered, or does this one affect another amendment of the Bloc Québécois that would be declared inadmissible, just so that we don't avoid doing useless work? I'd like to know it now, if there are any other clauses that are affected by that decision. So it would limit the benefits given out in a short period of time, whereas people will be affected by this recession over a very long period of time, longer than the government's providing for.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Cret. BQ4 was consequential to BQ1. That's why I linked the two of them together. But in response to your question, I appreciate that. BQ2, BQ3, BQ5 and BQ6 are all inadmissible because of the same argument with respect to the royal recommendation. So they all require the royal recommendation. I mean, I was going to go through them one by one, but if you choose, that will be the argument that applies to all of them.
Qu'on peut le faire pour BQ2, BQ3 pour tout de suite.
So we could perhaps deal with BQ2 and BQ3 now, and we'll see for the others, as to the others later on, because the others are further down in the bill, and I need to rethink that.
BQ2 and BQ3 are inadmissible. So the question is on Clause 225. Well, we have from 225 to, because BQ2, BQ3, and BQ4 are all inadmissible.
I think it's 229. From 225 to 299.
So we have until 299 in which we do not have any further amendments.
Juste afin de vous aider dans vos...
In order to help you in your work, I said at the beginning of the meeting that in order to facilitate your task, now if you want me to ask for the recorded vote at every step, each and every step of the way, but if the goal of our work is not to do this, you can assume that the NDP is going to ask for a recorded vote at each step of the way. If you want me to do that, I will.
Okay. So the request is for a recorded vote on every one, even if we do group them. Yeah. Okay, we'll have a recorded vote then up until Clause 299.
So, on which clause?
From clauses 225 to 299.
Okay. Mr. McAdam?
Yes.
Mr. McKay?
We're in favor.
Mr. Pachetti?
Yes.
Monsieur Carrier?
No.
No. No. No.
Monsieur Bernier?
Oui.
Mr. Decker? Mr. Cramp?
Yes.
Mr. Menzies?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace?
Oui.
Okay, the vote is 8-3, so clauses up until clause 299 are carried. We then go to clause 300, and we have the first NDP 1. Mr. Mulcair, you wish to move the amendment?
Oui, Monsieur le Président, je propose.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I move that Bill C-10 and Bill amended on clause 300 from lines on line 35 with the following. It's on page 286. Treasury Board accept those requiring contributions from other levels of government, a sum not exceeding 2.
Any further discussion?
De donner un peu de contexte.
I'd like to give a bit of context to this proposed amendment, and the best manner in which to do so is to back off a little bit from this wording, and I'll come back later on to explain the why of this amendment, technically speaking. But more in a general sense right now, we had the honor of the minister's presence here yesterday, and he confirmed that there is this huge scope of a number of orders, and he said that there would be 3 to 4% of an increase in government spending, so 2% or so in order to stimulate the country's economy, and so this would give us in line with the G7 and G8 countries. So if that was the case, that would be true. We would be in line with those countries. But the French expression that says it rather well, in English it's different, but we would say that it's a bit of a mishmash. I mean, the finance minister is trying to interfere with work that's being done in other jurisdictions around the world. In fact, when he presents these figures to explain what percentage of the GDP is required to stimulate the Canadian economy, he is including things that he has no control over whatsoever. And let's look at the facts. Here, we're beginning with the clauses that will be referred to the Treasury Board, or rather Consolidated Revenue Fund. So when municipalities will be obliged to meet this, they'll be able to meet or equal this contribution in order to benefit from it. So they're looking at a huge sum of money, tens of billions of dollars, and they're saying that the minister says these funds will be spent to stimulate the Canadian economy, but it's on the condition that the provinces and municipalities, who very often don't have the funds to do so, and municipalities who can't often deal with the federal government, will contribute an equal sum. So we, over the course of the morning, are going to be tabling a series of amendments to ensure that municipalities in particular and provinces can benefit from real stimulus of their economy without the federal government being able to impose on them a condition that they contribute equal funds. That is why this should be accepted. We're not asking for anyone to spend more than what is provided for in the budget. We are staying within those fixed sums, but we are saying that we have to stop this fiction of assuming that this amount of money will be met with an equal contribution from the provincial or municipal side. Stop that. Take this money, which is within your own budget as we speak, and ensure that those funds will be able to be withdrawn and spent quickly. We believe, and I'm going back to my friend Mr. Menzies was saying earlier, when he says that we are interfering with the work of the committee today and that things must go quickly,
in his wish to see this spending actually take place, he's going to vote in favor of this amendment, Mr. Chairman. Because what the government is doing in Mr. Flaherty's speech yesterday, it's clear that this fiction of over 3% of GDP spending to stimulate the economy is just that. it's an intellectual fraud perpetrated on the population, because the sums that they put up, the $10 billion or so in infrastructure and other spending that they refer to, is conditional upon the municipalities or the provinces ponying up a similar amount. So that's why the amendment here is being declared receivable, because we're not asking the federal government to spend a dime more than what's been provided for in the budget. But what we are saying is that that money can flow. Everybody's used these new buzzwords, shovel ready. None of these guys has ever held a shovel, but that doesn't matter. It has to be shovel ready, and you can see them out there with their bulldozers. But those projects can indeed start being built, and the construction can begin if this money doesn't have strings attached. Because right now, it's pure fiction. Because they're assuming that provinces or municipalities are going to spend money that they don't have. What is provided for here in the budget is money that the federal government does have. And we want that money to flow. We want it to go to infrastructure and to other programs where it can actually count. So the amendment being proposed by the New Democratic Party to Section 300 is to replace the line in Section 300 that provides that the Treasury Board will set conditions, and we're going to add this, except those requiring contributions from other levels of government, and then we keep with the same amount. In this case, $2 billion to provide funding for infrastructure projects primarily related to infrastructure rehabilitation. So this is one of the first amounts, a specific $2 billion for infrastructure rehabilitation, and the NDP is proposing that we take away the strings that the government has attached so that the money will actually be spent. Now, the Liberal Party has actually pointed out and done the research on it to prove that in the past year, money that was targeted for infrastructure spending in Canada was not spent. That in fact only 4% of targeted infrastructure money actually made it out the door. That's of course a problem of competence in public administration. But it's beyond that. It's an indication of the fact that these are just numbers on a piece of paper if we keep strings attached to them. So what we're trying to do, Mr. Chairman, is to make sure that what everybody seems to agree on, that the economy needs to be maintained, that stimulus spending is part of the solution here, that it actually occurs. The Conservatives are playing by sleight of hand here. This is a shell game. They're saying we're putting $2 billion on the table, but by the way, the provinces and the municipalities are going to have to pony up. That's going to be a condition for getting access to this money. It's never going to make it out the door. Provinces and the municipalities don't have that money, but they have the projects, the so-called shovel-ready projects, projects ready to be built. Yesterday we had the Canadian Urban Transit Association here in committee, provided us with a very long list of projects ready to go in cities across Canada. It's an important area in which to be spending. Here we're talking about infrastructure rehabilitation. A lot of things that can be done with that as well, Mr. Chairman. But the money will not flow, the projects will not be built, and more importantly, Canada will be simply slipstreaming. It will simply be following in the wake of the current being produced by the other economies that are actually spending the 2–3% of GDP to stimulate their economies. And this is what the Conservatives are actually up to. There's no real intention on the part of the Conservatives to spend this money, because this type of condition that they're putting in ensures that it will be like a lot of other promises in the past. It's not going to happen. So I'm thrilled to know that for once the Liberals are actually going to vote for something, because of course having done the excellent work that they did last week, and I find that it's important in politics to be able to recognize when something is done well by another party, last week the Liberals actually did something well. They did their homework, they crunched the numbers, they were able to prove that 96% of the money that had been promised last year was never spent. So I'm sure, Mr. Chairman, that this time the Liberals, having done that homework, having proved that the Conservatives can't be trusted when they put up numbers on infrastructure spending, are actually going to for once find their spinal column and vote for something. In this case, it's not for a single penny more of expenditure. So they can be relieved. It can't be considered a confidence motion because we're not requiring the government to spend another penny. So the only thing that we have to fear is fear itself. I suspect that if they don't vote for this, Mr. Chairman, the Liberals will be proving that they actually fear fear itself. Because there's no logical fear here. They can't even, I know how afraid they are about being wiped out by the NDP in the next general election. That's why they won't be calling it anytime soon, or won't be joining with us in defeating the government anytime soon. Whether or not that election ever comes before Michael Ignatieff becomes eligible for his pension. Oh no, he'll never become eligible for his pension. He's never worked in Canada. But that's an aside. Let's just say that, sticking with the subject of Section 300, the Liberals finally have a golden opportunity to show that they have principles, that they didn't do all this for their own self-interest, that their voting 53 times in the House with the Conservatives is now over, that on an issue where they've done their homework, where they've proven that the Conservatives can't be trusted, and that we're doing something to make sure that the money actually flows to the provinces and to the municipalities on infrastructure, we're convinced, Mr. Chairman, that the Liberals are finally going to find their hands, the ones that they've been sitting on for 3.5 years throughout the Dion-Ignatieff reign, and they're finally going to follow Mr. McCallum's leadership, and they're going to vote to make sure that the money flows. Thanks you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Mulcair. We'll go to Monsieur Crête.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would have a little question to put to Mr. Mulcair in order to better understand the content of the amendment and its impact. From his presentation, I recognize that the Minister of Finance is trying to slow down an impact on the economy because of the participation of the provinces and municipalities that he himself cannot ensure. What I'm wondering, and given that what's happened in the past can be any indication of what's happening in the future, the effect won't happen. There won't be the impact on the economy that is wanted. So I think that I'm wondering what the NDP and amendment can have as an effect if the municipalities and provinces and any other organizations with whom there might be some kind of agreement would be if this amendment would be passed. Would the impact really be positive? And if it was positive, how do you anticipate that these funds might be spent by the federal government while still respecting the various areas of jurisdiction? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My friend Mr. Crête is asking an excellent question, and I can talk to him about the experience that I had as a minister in the Quebec government. And I was faced with the entity of the former leader, Mr. Dion, on the $326 million that were due to Quebec for climate change, because $550 million had been given to Ontario. And Mr. McGuinty was very proud of that and said he was proud of how he'd gotten it. So when Quebec went to get their shares, you had to see the list of conditions that were to be imposed on the province of Quebec. Furthermore, he wanted to deal directly with municipalities, whereas municipalities being creatures of, or creations rather, of the provincial government, they could not do so, nor could they choose the program. So it depended, of course, on the attitude of each of the provinces. Some provinces had no problem with that. All I can tell you is that Quebec law continued to apply. There was a complete prohibition on municipalities dealing directly with that level of government, and what happens in Quebec would be that Quebec would take care of itself. So, in order to repair if a municipality wanted to repair a bridge, they could, but not in the way it's being suggested today. So we want to suggest the change in these lines so that this could happen. We want to remove the third, fourth, and fifth lines of Clause 300, which would require the Treasury Board accepting those requiring contributions from other levels of government, a sum not exceeding $2 billion to provide funding for infrastructure projects primarily related to infrastructure rehabilitation. So the changes would be just to those three lines, and it would read as such. There would be paid out of the Consolidated Revenue Fund on the requisition of the Minister of Transport in accordance with the terms and conditions approved by Treasury Board, except those requiring contributions from other levels of government, a sum not exceeding $2 billion. So to sum up, and still in response to my colleague Mr. Cutts' question, what we are doing quite simply is to remove the possibility of the federal government making these expenditures contingent upon the equal contributions by the provinces and the municipalities. And I will also add the following. Currently, the federal government presumes that they are going to be able to spend the municipalities and the provinces' funds. And they presume that because they've included those figures in the figures that the minister presented to the committee yesterday, while bragging about all of the effect on the GDP. So it's that presumption that is so arrogant and which is really contrary to the agreements between the various levels of governments. Provinces and municipalities are being told, you will spend these funds, and that is why we are removing those strings, and that the money, once again, should flow, and it would be distributed proportionally for the provinces and municipalities projects that they would present. Thank you. Mr. Cret. Another question for clarification, please. That would therefore mean that if there was a reality such as that suggested by the NDP in the amendment, we might possibly not see a bottleneck, or at least at the end of the day, this bottleneck of non-spending of the monies projected in the budget. The economic slowdown that we had might have been dealt with much more effectively if indeed over the last 2 years we had spent the money that had been planned under the program. So to announce funds and then not spend them because there aren't agreements that were successfully hammered out with the provinces, or that the provinces don't have the same financial possibilities, ends up in that same result, in that bottleneck. So I think it's really quite depressing, and if I was a citizen, I would find that really almost discouraging and depressing. So many announcements have been made for infrastructure projects over the last 2 years that haven't produced the results that were hoped for, because we haven't found the proper mechanism in order to ensure that these funds be spent. Whereas we know that today what's being said across the board is that we need the money for these programs, that construction needs to begin quickly, and we need to replace the lack of spending that's happening on the consumer front because of what's happening in the United States, and which is having an effect on our economy directly. Once again, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Cret has summed that up very well. He's summed up the situation, and that is why I have said that I'm so optimistic that the Liberals will find a way to use their hands and vote along with us on this, because it's the Liberals who proved the lack of action on the part of the Conservatives during the last budget. 96% of the budget was not spent because there was so much red tape and incompetence on the part of the government. They did not get those monies out. So we'll see a little bit later on today whether or not they'll be successful. Some people have the nerve to suggest that the fact that we are out to protect the environment is preventing these projects from going forward, and that's a scandalous assertion to make, because there's nothing to uphold it. But while I'm on the subject, the government, in order to move forward its extreme right agenda against the rights of women, the union rights, and the environment, is taking advantage of the economic crisis that exists. However, since we're never certain of what the Liberals are going to do under any circumstances, I will allow myself to remind my Conservative colleagues that the famous $326 million in question that the Liberals declined to spend or give to the province of Quebec were finally transferred by whom? By the Conservative government, the current government. So, if ever the Liberals did not see the wisdom of seeing this money's flow, who knows, perhaps enough Conservatives will have reflected on the issue and will have understood that it is in the interest of the economy, that they don't have to keep tearing out their hair and saying it's everyone's responsibility to stimulate the economy. They can ensure that these monies will be spent on these wonderful projects, and they will vote along with us, because the Liberals, I have to say, we can't ever really count on them, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, merci. Monsieur Carrier.
Mr. Carrier. Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The arguments put forward by my colleague, Mr. Molker, seem acceptable to us, given, in fact, that they are going to try to ensure a uniformity of spending by the federal government across the country. I would like to propose or move a sub-amendment, a friendly amendment, if he agrees, because we are quite concerned by the responsibilities that Quebec has in determining priorities. Therefore, in his amendment, at the end, it's that what the amounts approved by the Treasury Board, I would like to add at the end, according to the priorities set out by the provinces. So that is what I would add. And therefore, that is the sub-amendment that we would suggest. And we'd like to suggest in all of that that the province's priorities are well established and well known, and they're well within the government's spending priorities too.
Repeat your amendment. So my understanding is it's after the word "to." But if I could just get you to repeat your amendment.
Non. Il faut travailler dans la version française.
No, that it comes in a different spot in the French versus the English. In the French, it would come according to the conditions approved by Treasury Board, and insert at that point, according to the priorities set by the provinces. That's what we would add. Therefore, what we're adding in the end is just that, as well as Treasury Board, always bearing in mind the priorities that each of the provinces has established. For us, at least in the Bloc Québécois, that would ensure that Quebec's priorities would be well respected, and that would apply to each of the provinces. If my colleague agrees to accept this friendly amendment to his amendment.
I do have a ruling on this sub-amendment. The sub-amendment is inadmissible because it introduces a new concept into the bill. The introduction of provincial priorities is a new concept that is beyond the scope of Bill C-10 and is therefore inadmissible. And if you refer to House of Commons Procedure and Practice, page 654, an amendment to a bill that was referred to committee after second reading is out of order if it is beyond the scope and principle of the bill. Therefore, your sub-amendment is inadmissible. Okay. And the chair's ruling is not debatable, but the member can choose to challenge it if he wishes. Monsieur Carrier.
Oui. Ben, Monsieur le Président.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I have to say that I'm against that decision. It's certainly not against the whole intent of the infrastructure program. That means that the
Do you wish to challenge the ruling of the chair?
Je conteste votre décision.
Challenge your decision. Because the province's priorities are critical for us, are essential.
Okay, so the motion then is that the chair's ruling be sustained, and we'll, I assume, have a recorded vote.
Mr. McCallum? Yes. Mr. McKay?
Yes.
Mr. Pachetti?
Oui, monsieur.
Monsieur Carrier?
Non.
No. 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 Yes, rather, sorry.
Mr. Decker?
Yes.
Mr. Cramp?
Oui.
Mr. Menzies?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace?
Okay. The
Point of order, Mr.
chair's
Chairman?
ruling is sustained by a vote of 8-3. Mr. Pachetti on a point of order.
Yes. Can the record state that this is your first challenge and you survived it? So, welcome to the committee. Welcome to Finance Committee.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a little more exciting than Industry Committee, I must say, in certain ways. Thank you. Thank you. Then we will go. Is there any further discussion with respect to NDP 1? Mr. Mulcair.
Mais, Monsieur le Président, juste pour dire que malgré...
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to say that despite your ruling and its challenge, I hope that there is some means of convincing the rest of my colleagues that the fact that it would not be specified that it was according to the province's priorities, that those realities would be taken into account in reality. So I hope that people really will support this because, as an example, a concrete one, the City of Montreal absolutely cannot allow itself to contribute in this way. And the Mayor of Toronto also has clearly said that he could not pony up what's being asked for by the federal government. So a lot of this money will never see the light of day. And I have the impression that we'd be making a very grave mistake if this NDP amendment is not carried. And as I said earlier on, this does not involve any new funds whatsoever by the state. Zero. Therefore, the Liberals cannot even invent some kind of fear in light of this amendment. What we are simply trying to say is that we want the money to flow and that they stop attaching conditions and strings to that. So in conclusion, we hope that everyone will support our amendment.
On the same point.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Je peux pas, il y a certaines choses que je peux laisser.
There are some things I can let slide, but there are others that I cannot. And in fact, last week and the week before, I had meetings with people in the City of Montreal, and they want us to pass this budget. They are ready to make the contributions in order for the infrastructure funds to flow. So I think it's all well and good to speak on behalf of other people, or rather it's not okay to do that when it's not true.
Discussion? If not, I'll call the vote on NDP 1.
Mr. McCallum? Mr. McKay?
Abstain.
Mr. Pachetti?
Abstain.
Monsieur Carrier?
No.
No. I'm against. For. Against.
Mr. Cramp?
No.
Mr. Menzies?
No.
Mr. Wallace?
Nope.
Mr. McCallum?
Abstain.
Okay, and the amendment is defeated 6-2. 6-2.
Yes, only two.
No.
I'm sorry.
7 to 1.
7 to 1, sorry.
7 to 1. The amendment is defeated 7 to 1. Now, the vote then is on Clause 300. So shall Clause 300 carry?
Okay, Mr. McCallum?
Yes.
Mr. McKay?
Yes.
Mr. Pachetti?
Oui.
Monsieur Carrier?
Non.
Monsieur Laforêt?
Non.
Monsieur Mulcair?
No.
Monsieur Bernier?
Oui.
Mr. Decker?
Yes.
Mr. Cramp?
Yes.
Mr. Menzies?
Oui.
Mr. Wallace?
Oui.
Clause 300 carries 8-3. We will now go to Clause 301, and we have Amendment NDP 2. Mr. Mulcair, you wish to move this? Point of order, Mr. McKay.
Seek from the mover of NDP 2, 3, 4, and 5 whether we could group these votes as they're essentially all of the same vote and essentially all of the same arguments.
So Mr. Mulcair and Mr. McKay is proposing to group NDP 2, 3, 4, and 5 because he's arguing they deal with the same subject matter.
As you'll notice, Mr. Chair, Article 300 deals with infrastructure spending related to rehabilitation. 301 is more specifically dealing with sums provided for provinces and territories under the Provincial Territorial Infrastructure-Based Funding Program for infrastructure projects. How could I ever deprive our Ontario MPs of the ability to vote against David Miller, to vote against infrastructure spending in Ontario and in the major cities of Ontario? I think that everybody in Ontario should see what a bunch of spineless, unprincipled people the MPs from Ontario are.
Okay, I'll take that as a no. NDP 2. Mr. Mulclair, you wish to move this?
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Alors,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Therefore, our second amendment is intended to amend Clause 301, which currently provides the following. Under infrastructure-based funding program for the provinces and territories, 3101 says that at the request of the Minister of Transport, in accordance with terms and conditions approved by the Treasury Board, a sum not exceeding $495 million to provide payments to provinces and territories under the Provincial Territorial Infrastructure-Based Funding Program for infrastructure projects. Therefore, we are moving an amendment to lines 2 to 4, the following. Or in the French version, that is to say in line 5 in the English, that at the request of the Minister of Transport, in accordance with terms and conditions approved by the Treasury Board, accepting those requiring contributions from other levels of government, a sum not exceeding $495 million to the provinces and territories under the Provincial Territorial Infrastructure-Based Funding Program for infrastructure projects. Therefore, you will have understood, Mr. Chairman, that we're in another section under a different subject than the previous amendment, and that is why you have to look at them separately. Also, you will understand that once again, the people who are giving me advice on the matter have indicated to me that these amendments are absolutely allowed. Now, if people are wondering why some amendments that were suggested were not debatable and others were, it's because if any amendment is intended to impose new spending on the government, that really is against the committee's, the rules of functioning of the committee. They can't impose new spending. However, the committee can indeed modify the conditions of planned spending so that that money can be spent, and that is what we are doing here in light of this $495 million spending. However, as we've already had the opportunity to say, we cannot count on the Conservatives. We cannot count on them to spend the money that they have a tendency to plan for and project. And we have figures to support that only 4% of the planned spending in the past have truly seen the light of day and really have flowed from government coffers and from Her Majesty's government. So we see that the coffers have been replenished because of that. Except that the Conservatives are once again pleased to impose conditions, and in this case it is that municipal governments and provincial governments will be obliged to pony up or ante up, from, if you take poker terminology, the same contribution as the government, the federal government, and that's completely unrealistic because we know that municipalities cannot possibly do so. One specific case coming from my city, Montreal, which is what the mayor, Mr. Tremblay, said. He said he cannot. There's not a direct transfer of funds that he can use. It has to be on the condition that he ponies up the same amounts of money, which he does not have. So there may be wonderful projects, but he cannot simply let that money go. Mr. Miller from Toronto, the mayor, is absolutely clear on the same point in his reaction to the budget, that these sums will never see the light of day. Therefore, we can see once again that you can see how the Conservatives are puffing themselves up with these figures that they're putting out, and they're trying to say, look, we're going to meet the demands of the G7 rather. We're going to spend 3% of our GDP in order to stimulate the economy, whereas they're not going to do so. So the NDP, with its proposed amendment to Clause 301, proposes to remove the conditions the strings that have been attached that requires that the provinces and municipalities meet the same, put out the same amount of money as the federal government. So and once again, we're not changing the sums involved, but the best way of ensuring that these funds be spent is to not have that condition.
Further discussion on this amendment? Monsieur Laforêt.
Sur cet amendement.
On this amendment, Mr. Chairman, the Bloc Québécois is going to support it for one reason, but we're not certain that the Quebec government really would control the work under this. So until we get that assurance, it's actually not a sufficient amount of information.
Je l'avais dit délicatement.
Well, I had said it really reading between the lines when I talked about Clause 300, but because the manpower, control of manpower, of labor rather, is involved, we will ensure that that money will be spent if it is passed in this. So if it is defeated because there are not further clauses that are added in order to ensure that control of labor, I think the Bloc is mistaken in the attitude it's taking here today. I think it's always important to ensure that the provinces are respected under our Constitution in the same way that Quebec has forbidden its municipalities to deal directly with the federal government. For us, this all goes together. It all makes sense. But I will ask my Bloc colleague to reflect on the logic of the amendment that is before us here at the moment. There's nothing that is amended here in the areas he's saying. However, if we pass it, we remove the obligation of having to spend an equal amount for the municipalities and provinces. And as I said, there's nothing that changes in terms of labor and control and provincial jurisdiction in these areas. Quebec is always going to be able to deal directly with its municipalities, and I feel that it's a good idea. I feel it's a good idea, and this might be paradoxical to say, but in terms of the fundamental and basic work that was done by the Liberal Party and made public by Gerard Kennedy last week, when he proved with all of the figures in hand and the proper analysis to back it up that only 4% of the billions of dollars promised in spending last year, or the millions of dollars, never saw the light of day. So I think that is a very good reason to vote in favor of this amendment and to ensure that the money really is spent and that the money flows. It would be unfortunate because of a lack of clarification that might be dealt with technically, we might assume that there might be a problem. There would not necessarily be one. And what is clear is that if we don't pass this amendment, if we don't carry this amendment, the problems will remain for the City of Montreal. The money will never be spent, and Montreal will never be able to carry out its projects. The City of Montreal will always be subject to provincial legislation that prohibits municipalities from dealing directly with the federal government. And therefore, I'm appealing to your common sense that I recognize you all have, and especially from my Bloc colleagues, rather, to carry this amendment, to vote for it, because we don't want to disappoint Quebec municipalities if we don't support it. Thank you. Mr. Carrier. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I share Mr. Mulcair's opinion as to that it is obvious that the provincial priorities should be taken into account with this whole thing, but the mere fact of mentioning it, you noticed earlier, the Liberal and Conservative members voted against. They were against mentioning that the provinces should be able to establish their own priorities. So it really makes me question the importance of that and whether that's really there. We need to ensure that that thinking is recognized and exists, and within the scope of the government's budgets, it has often not taken provincial priorities into account. That's why it's important to say so, given that there is hesitation and people don't want to accept that that be written down. Thank you. Mr. Mulcair. It would have been interesting to add this if we could have done so, but we cannot do so. You have made that ruling. It's an amendment that is not admissible. So let's try to deal with reality nevertheless. What we would have liked to have seen would be to respect the priorities of the provinces and their jurisdiction over labor. But we cannot do that. What we can do is remove the obligation that the City of Montreal would have to find monies it does not have if it wants to have access to these federal funds. So let's at least do what we can in removing that condition. We can't say that because we can't repair both the doors and the windows of the building that we won't go ahead and fix the windows at least. We can fix one thing that is a flaw in this bill. But the argument, if I understand it well, on behalf of the Bloc, is that because we can't repair a second thing, we won't proceed with the first. For me, that doesn't hold water as logic. I think we can help the City of Montreal, and I know that this isn't the Bloc's primary consideration, but I also want to help the City of Toronto. Mr. Miller, the Mayor of Toronto, is very clear on this point. He wants to unblock these funds as well.
Do everything that we can to make sure that the money actually flows. Mayor Miller of Toronto has been very clear on this matter, that he won't be able to come up with the funds to match the federal funds. A lot of the provinces are in the same boat. So once again, we're faced with the following situation, where the federal government is putting up a large number, saying that this represents Canada's stimulus spending to meet the G7 and G20 requirements, but they're making it conditional. There are strings attached. And we think that that's a mistake. So what we're trying to do in 301 is to remove some of those strings, to make it possible for cities like Montreal and Toronto to be able to have access to that money. And I'll say this in ending, that it's very clear from the fact that a lot of this money goes to the current Minister of Transport, Mr. Baird, and I hope this doesn't come as a shock to you, but he's just slightly partisan. I know that might come as a bit of a surprise, but he's ever so mildly partisan, and he has made it clear before certain groups, including groups that work with it in areas like urban transit, that you'd better come from an area that has some conservative MPs if you want to see any of this money. So this, this slush pot that they're putting together, at the very least, we can make sure that some of it flows to the cities like Montreal and Toronto that won't be able to match the funds if we don't make the change. That's why we maintain our suggestion, Mr. Chairman, that Section 301 be amended as we suggested. That is to say that 301 be amended to take away the requirement for cities or the provinces to match the funds, that the money spelled out in 301 actually flow to infrastructure projects in conformity with the provincial territorial infrastructure-based funding program.
Okay, thank you. So then we'll have the vote on Amendment NDP 2.
Mr. Murphy.
Aye. We abstain. We abstain. I abstain.
Mr. McKay.
Abstain.
Mr. Pachetti. Monsieur Carrier.
Non.
Monsieur Laforêt.
Non.
Monsieur Mulcair.
Oui.
Monsieur Bernier.
Contre.
Mr. Deckard.
Yeah, but can't they just... Hey, you've called your name.
Sorry,
so
no.
it's no.
Non.
Mr. Cramp.
Contre.
Mr. Menzies.
No.
Mr. Wallace.
Non.
Okay, the amendment is defeated, 7-1. We will then have the vote on Clause 301.
Mr. Murphy.
Yes. Yes.
Mr. McKay.
Yes.
Mr. Pachetti.
Oui.
Monsieur Carrier.
Non.
Monsieur Laforêt.
Non.
Monsieur Mulcair.
No.
Monsieur Bernier.
Oui, oui, oui.
Mr. Deckard.
Oui.
Mr. Cramp.
Oui.
Mr. Menzies.
Yes.
Mr. Wallace.
Yes.
Okay, Clause 301 is carried, 8-3. We now go to Clause 302, and we have Amendment NDP 3. Mr. Mulcair, you wish to move NDP 3?
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Alors,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The third amendment moved by the NDP is intended to change Clause 302 of Bill C-10, which deals with the communities component of the Building Canada Fund, and is intended to replace line 15 with the following. The clause reads that on the requisition of the Minister of Transport, in accordance with terms and conditions approved by the Treasury Board, a sum not exceeding $250 million to provide funding for infrastructure projects in communities that have a population of less than 100,000. The lines replacing it would be with the new clause. It would read as follows, that on the requisition of the Minister of Transport, in accordance with the terms and conditions approved by the Treasury Board, except those requiring contributions from other levels of government, a sum not exceeding $250 million, and so forth. So I think you will have understood, Mr. Chairman, that this time I am convinced that I'm going to have the support of my Bloc Québécois colleagues, because this time we're talking about communities that have a population of less than 100,000. And because under Quebec legislation, those very communities may not deal directly with the federal government, the Quebecers will, or Quebec will see its priorities recognized there. I think that my other colleagues will hopefully recognize that their communities that have a population of less than 100,000 will also follow the logic and see the wisdom of this, because once again, we are presuming that municipalities, that these communities with a population of less than 100,000 would ever be in a position to put up the money in equal numbers to what the federal government is proposing to spend. $250 million is not chicken feed. This money has to flow. As we've already said, if this money is provided with these strings attached, that is to say that these small communities will have to put up the same amounts, it's very likely that these funds will never be spent. And that will prove once again our hypothesis that the Conservatives have amused themselves. They have pretended that they will spend all of this in order to reach their 3% of GDP target, whereas there will be no such thing. It will not happen. And these municipalities and provinces can't pony up the same amounts. They have also pretended that $8 billion in reduced spending will happen. That is a joke, also because the Conservatives are the worst public administrators in the history of this country. In a mere 3 years before this current budget, they had already increased by $40 billion per year the government spending, more than 23% increase in spending with no results, zero concrete results for the public. So it goes without saying that what is planned for here is going to be more of the same. So once again, Mr. Chairman, there is no vision, no concrete results. And they're now producing these figures, $250 million in this case, to say that those funds will serve those communities. But we know at the outset that those same communities are in no position to meet their share of those planned expenses, so that those monies would be unblocked. So once again, the NDP is taking on the defense of these small communities, and I beg my colleagues from the Bloc and the Liberal Party of Canada to help us, because otherwise those funds will never be spent in those communities. Our amendment is admissible because it does not require additional spending on the part of the federal government. But however, we're saying at the same time that the federal government must spend these funds, and they must stop attaching these strings to the equal contribution of the provinces.
Things up in English. Right now we're looking at the communities component of the Building Canada Fund, $250 million for communities with a population of less than 100,000 people. And I think that in a municipality with fewer than 100,000 people, that it's quite obvious that we're going to be dealing with the type of situation we've already described. Federal government's putting up a big number, $250 million. It's not going to get spent. Most of those municipalities can't pony up the cash to meet their part of the obligation. Provinces have already said that that money won't be there. And to assuage my colleagues from the Bloc, just to remind them that existing provincial legislation in Quebec, duly enacted by the National Assembly of Quebec, provides that those municipalities are not allowed to deal directly with the federal government. So any concern that they might have regarding jurisdiction is obviated. I think that the City of Montreal, as much as the City of Toronto in the previous examples, deserve their money. Here, the smaller towns and cities of Quebec, Ontario, of BC, of all the other areas of Canada that so sorely need this money. There are a lot of municipalities that fall into this category of under 100,000. They deserve the support. They don't have the money to meet this new requirement that they match funds with the federal government. That's why we're proposing it be removed, but the amount, of course, is being maintained. There just won't be any strings attached anymore, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, thank you. Monsieur Laforêt.
Once again, Mr. Chairman, for the same reasons I invoked earlier on, the Bloc is going to be voting against this amendment because, once again, we have no guarantee that Quebec can control the labor under this kind of initiative and under this clause. So when we know what the intentions are of the Conservative government to interfere and get involved once again, despite the existing legislation in the province of Quebec, and that prevent, as Mr. Mulcair has already said, the Conservative government from dealing directly with municipalities. We do not have that assurance, so we are going to vote against. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yesterday, our friend, my friend Mr. McCallum, spoke on behalf of the Liberals and really offered an olive branch to the minister so that the minister would have an opportunity to say to him and tell him that every comma and period in the document would be seen as an issue of confidence and that they would have to go to the Governor General and hopefully trigger another election. So the leader he has, I don't blame him. However, the Liberals are inventing fears. There are not issues of confidence in these issues we're discussing here. And to make that matching funds a condition is not acceptable. It's not seen, it cannot be seen as a new initiative of spending. So the Liberals, in asking that question of Mr. Flaherty, managed to invent new fears for themselves yet again.
And if they aren't afraid enough that they're going to be afraid, then they're going to invent some new fears so that people can continue to support the Conservatives. It seems to me that my friends in the Bloc are inventing fears this time because there's nothing here, nothing that we're doing beyond the fact that in the collection for municipalities of 5,000
Les municipalités en question.
inhabitants, there is a provision. So people in their respective regions are going to be able to have access to this sum without having to provide an identical amount. For the others, we might understand, since it was provinces, or more generally for the federal government, we could follow their argument on the fact that it was not clear. But they cannot say that for 302. Section 302, we can't claim that there is a concern, that there is a lack of respect for provincial jurisdiction. That's out of the question. It's impossible to maintain that that is the case in the case of 302 because the Quebec has an ironclad law in black and white that says that this cannot happen. They can't change that. So there's no reason for fear here. So what we're seeing is something where the Liberals are inventing fears to support the Conservatives. They're afraid of bringing the government down. That's quite unique. It's really quite unique in Canadian history. We've got an official opposition which has become the official abstention. We've seen them at work because they're afraid of being afraid. they're afraid of beating their old record of voting for the Conservatives. But I think they're going to do it by abstaining so many times, as many times as they propped up the Conservatives in the past. So it's pitiful to see people doing that, people who are just lying down before this. We know that they're sellouts, but we didn't know that their price was zero. Here again, I'm looking at 302, clause 302, no other. And I would call on my colleagues in the bloc to be able to see that these municipalities of less than 100,000 will not have the money for their projects at all if we don't have this amendment. So I think we shouldn't be inventing far-fetched constitutional arguments for voting against an amendment that is simply going to facilitate things for municipalities. We want to make things easier for them. That's the objective here. The condition that the government might impose through the Treasury, that is the condition whereby there is an obligation to meet the federal expense before having access to a party, that would be removed. I've had the right to do this because there's no new expense involved. I would ask the bloc to think about this carefully and to vote for the amendment. Perhaps, who knows, there might be some hope. Life is made up of hope, Mr. Chair. Perhaps the Liberals might find some backbone and would vote for us to remove this obligation that is placed on the municipalities to match the federal funding before having access to the funds, because the minister says they are real sums. He's saying that he's met the objectives of the G7 and the G20, but that's not the case, and we have the proof of that here today.
P3.
Mr. Murphy?
Abstain.
Mr. McKay?
Abstain.
Mr. Pachetti?
Contre.
Monsieur Carrier?
Non.
Monsieur Laforêt?
Je suis contre.
Monsieur Mulcair?
Pour.
Monsieur Bernier?
Contre.
Mr. Decker?
Against.
Mr. Cramp?
Against.
Mr. Menzies?
No.
Mr. Wallace?
No.
Okay, the amendment is defeated, 8-1. The vote will be then on clause 302. Shall clause 302 carry?
Mr. Murphy?
I'm for.
Mr. McKay?
In favor.
Mr. Pachetti?
Oui.
Monsieur Carrier?
Non.
Monsieur Laforêt?
Non.
Monsieur Mulcair?
No.
Monsieur Bernier?
Oui.
Mr. Decker?
In favor.
Mr. Cramp?
Oui.
Mr. Menzies?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace?
Oui.
Okay, it's carried 8-3. We will now go to clause 303. On page 287, we have an amendment NDP 4. Mr. Mulcair, you wish to move the amendment?
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président. Alors, cette fois-ci, on est dans...
Mr. Chair, this time we're talking about the Green Infrastructure Fund. So clause 303 states there may be paid out of the Consolidated Revenue Fund on the requisition of the Minister of Transport in accordance with terms and conditions approved by the Treasury Board, a sum not exceeding $200 million to support infrastructure projects that promote a clean environment. This time, it's lines 19 to 21 that we would remove, and in replacing line 24 in English, Treasury Board except those requiring contributions from other levels of government, a sum not exceeding $2. This time the figure is $200,000 to support infrastructure projects to promote a clean environment. Okay. Now, in the light of the axe murder that the Conservative is about to inflict on the Navigable Waters Protection Act here in Canada, I think that the least of the things would be to ensure that the amounts, however small they may be, which are set out in Clause 303, not be hijacked, that there be no constraints on this funding. If we don't pass the amendment that we're putting forward here, we would ensure that the money would probably never get out except in the form of patronage through Minister Baird. So what we are suggesting, Mr. Chair, is that we remove the obligation to meet the amounts set by the federal government from whether the municipal government or the provincial government. We want a clean environment fund to happen. We would have liked the budget to do more along those lines, Mr. Chair. In fact, if we look at this objectively, the simplest expression of sustainable development is placing an obligation on one generation not to pass on to a future generation and environmental, economic, or social debt. But with this budget, unfortunately, we are leaving future generations a heavy financial burden. The least of it would have been to provide for a green infrastructure program which could have profited future generations or benefited them, but that didn't happen. The amounts put forward in Clause 303 are minimal, so we are moving this amendment to make the federal government's provision of these funding conditional on identical funding from other levels of government, because at the very least, the money can get out, can be paid. So just like the amendment put forward in the previous clauses, we want to ensure that the money actually gets out.
The amendment proposed to Article 303, which right now reads that there may be paid out of the Consolidated Revenue Fund on the requisition of the Minister of Transport in accordance with the terms and conditions approved by the Treasury Board, a sum not exceeding $200 million to support infrastructure projects that promote a clean environment. We find that we're already, unfortunately, bequeathing to future generations a heavy financial burden because we're going into debt with this budget, so they have to pay it off. The very least would have been for us to come up with some real spending on the environment, green renewable energy, for example, clean renewables, something that future generations would at least be able to take advantage of if we're going to be already leaving them with this debt. But what we have, in fact, is a rather paltry sum of $200 million in Section 303. But the problem is, and this is why in these various sections we've been proposing that the conditionality be taken out. The problem is that when you say in Article 303, in accordance with the terms and conditions approved by the Treasury Board, of course the government has already announced that those terms and conditions will include the obligation to have matching funds. So what we're saying in the NDP is we'll take out that condition. So we're saying Treasury Board accept those requiring contributions from other levels of government, whether they be municipal or federal. So we want the money to actually flow. We don't find the money sufficient. But we do think that at the very least, if the government's going to be putting up this number of $200 million on spending for green infrastructure, that it should not be conditional on similar spending by the municipalities or the provinces. So that's why NDP's Amendment 4 seeks to remove from Section 303 this condition that the Treasury Board could impose that there be similar contributions from other levels of government. Now, you've already ruled that these amendments are acceptable under the provisions governing the workings of these committees as we look at a budgetary statute, because we're not asking that new money be spent. If my amendment had sought to change $200 million to $250 million, you would have ruled it out of order. So I'm not asking the government to spend more money, although I would like them to. That's not the purpose of this amendment. purpose of this amendment is to ensure that the paltry $200 million that is there on environment, paltry not because $200 million is an unimportant sum, paltry because in relation to the overall needs and the environment and our obligations towards future generations, it's very minor. But we want to make sure that despite the fact that it is minor, that it actually gets spent. Alors, Monsieur le Président, en terminant, j'espère que puisque...
So I hope, Mr. Chair, since this time there cannot be any link whatsoever with relations between the federal government and Quebec, that my colleagues in the bloc will support the proposal and support our amendment, which would remove the strings tied to this funding for the environment. It wouldn't change anything if we start talking about constitutional disputes or whatever. That becomes an objection to everything. That if the objective is to help Quebec generally, we have to be practical ultimately. So the Bloc voted against amendment whereby the money would go to people, to communities with less than 100,000 people. I think that for the environment, the vote won't be voting against the amendment, which will ensure that the money will actually get out. And that Liberals, we can always hope for miracles, Mr. Chair, that the Liberals, for once in their lives, won't just lie down and play dead. They will find the courage and will be able to act, not as the official abstention, but as the official opposition.
Monsieur Carrier.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Carrier. I can't speak as much as my colleague from the NDP. I can't make such a long speech, but I would like to remind him, because he did refer to the Bloc, the position of the Bloc. We agree with having the money come out as quickly as possible from the government and that it be used to promote the economic recovery we need so much. But this is no reason for creating chaos and having various levels of government investing in all sorts of areas just to create a recovery. You know, there are some provinces in this country with their own jurisdiction. So when we talk about infrastructure, it is important that the provinces set their priorities, and that's why they are involved in the costs of these projects. We're talking about green infrastructure. That's an even better kind of infrastructure because the idea is to protect our environment and to think about sustainable development. But there, too, the municipalities are involved and they come under provincial jurisdiction. So it's important that the provinces have a say in setting the priorities. And the federal government wants to contribute to that. It's not a whim on our part. It's essential if we want to have good understanding among the various levels of government. We all have to respect our various levels of jurisdiction.
Call the question then on NDP 4, the amendment NDP 4.
Mr. Murphy? Mr. McKay?
Also.
Mr. Pachetti?
Abstain.
Monsieur Carrier?
Contre.
Monsieur Laforêt?
Contre.
Miss Wally-Shalich?
Contre.
Yes.
That's my amendment.
It's the NDP amendment.
En faveur.
I'm helping you out here. You should vote for, Judy.
En
I'm helping you out.
Why are you against?
Because they're right.
Order. Mr. Wallace, it's a vote.
My colleague, Judy.
You're very helpful.
Thank you. Very
So,
helping her.
yes. Is it yes? Yes.
Ms. Washali, you're in favor.
I'm in favor.
Okay.
Monsieur Bernier?
Contre.
Mr. Decker?
Against.
Mr. Cramp?
No.
Mr. Menzies?
No.
Mr. Wallace?
Against.
Okay, the amendment is defeated. The vote will then be on clause 302. Sorry, 303.
Mr. Murphy?
Favor.
For.
Mr. McKay?
In favor.
Mr. Pachetti?
Oui.
Monsieur Carrier?
Contre.
Monsieur Laforêt?
Contre.
Miss Washali-Shalich?
Contre.
Monsieur Bernier?
En faveur.
Mr. Decker?
Oui. Oui.
Mr. Cramp?
Yes.
Mr. Menzies?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace?
Oui.
Okay. It is carried 8-3. Colleagues, I have clauses 304 to 311 where I do not have an amendment. The NDP wants a vote on every one. Okay. Clause 304 to 311. Recorded vote.
Mr. Murphy?
In favor.
Mr. McKay?
In favor.
Mr. Pachetti?
In favor. Oui.
Monsieur Carrier?
Contre.
Monsieur Laforêt?
Contre.
Miss Washley-Shalis?
Contre.
Monsieur Bernier?
En faveur.
Mr. Deckard?
En faveur.
Mr. Cramp?
Yes.
Mr. Menzies?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes.
Okay, that is carried. We then go to clause 312. We have 3 amendments for clause 312. We'll start with NDP 5.
So, Mr. Chairperson, thank you. You have the amendment before you. In effect, it will...
Shirley, I'm advised I have to give a ruling first on the block amendments.
Okay.
Okay. So for colleagues, for clause 312, we have 3 amendments. We have NDP 5, we have block 5, and we have block 6. I'm assuming the block wants to read both amendments. Ms. Secret earlier on had asked, when I had ruled earlier on the previous block amendments, and the ruling of the chair will be the same with respect to the royal recommendation, and I can read that. Bill C-10 provides $500 million for the renovation and retrofit of social housing. The amendment BQ5 and BQ6, they seek to amend the bill so that this sum is increased. House of Commons Procedure and Practice states at page 655, quote, an amendment must not offend the financial initiative of the Crown. An amendment is therefore inadmissible if it imposes a charge on the public treasury or if it exceeds the objects or purposes or relaxes the conditions and qualifications as expressed in the royal recommendation. Therefore, in the opinion of the chair, the amendment proposes a new scheme which seeks to alter the terms and conditions of the royal recommendation. Therefore, I rule the amendment inadmissible for both BQ5 and BQ6. And as I've stated before, the ruling is not debatable, but members can challenge the chair on the ruling. So, Monsieur Laforêt, you'd like to challenge the ruling?
Écoutez, Monsieur le Président.
Well, Mr. Chair, yes, I'm going to be challenging that ruling. The 2 amendments are not identical. Number 6 doesn't amend the amount involved. I know that you're making a decision similar to the other ones for in the case of 5, but in 6 we're talking about changing the words to say construction, renovation, and it's not the amount. So it's very different.
BQ5 seeks to amend the bill so that the sum is increased from $500 million. The BQ6 seeks to amend the bill to provide for new construction. So, but in both cases, the amendment proposes a new scheme which seeks to alter the terms and conditions of the royal recommendation, and therefore the amendment is ruled inadmissible. And that is the ruling of the chair, and Monsieur Laforêt has indicated that he wants to challenge the ruling. Therefore, it will be that the chair's ruling be sustained. We'll have a recorded vote.
Yeah. Mr. Murphy?
In favor of the chair's ruling.
Okay. Mr. McKay?
Also.
Mr. Pachetti?
En faveur du président.
Monsieur Carrier?
Pour. Ah oui, 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 pour. Non, contre. Hein? Non, je conteste votre décision.
Monsieur
Challenge your decision. Against.
Madame Miss Washeli-Chalice?
Contre.
Monsieur Bernier?
Pour.
Mr. Decker?
For.
Mr. Cramp?
For.
Mr. Menzies?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace?
For.
The chair's ruling is sustained. We will now move to Amendment NDP 5, and this amendment is in order. So we'll let Ms. Washeli-Chalice introduce the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. So first I'll move it that Bill C-10 in Clause 312 be amended by replacing line 29 on page 289 with the following: except those requiring contributions from other levels of government, a sum not exceeding $500 million.
Thank you. Would you like to speak to the amendment?
Speak to this amendment. You have heard from my colleague, the finance critic for the NDP, the general reasoning for this amendment throughout Bill C-10. You will understand, in fact, that our concern is with the requirement on the part of the federal government to engage in cost-sharing arrangements with municipalities and provincial governments. And you have heard that that places an unanticipated and most likely an intolerable burden on our municipalities and provincial governments at a time when investment in infrastructure, and in this case particularly when it comes to investment in housing, is so critical. If there is ever an item or a matter pertaining to infrastructure and investment that will stimulate the economy and help people through the worst times of an economic recession, it is when it comes to housing. I don't need to tell you, Mr. Chairperson, how much we've missed having a national housing policy in this country. And your government has made an attempt to start to put some money back after the Liberals basically destroyed any kind of a national housing policy. Let me take you just back to 1993 when we dealt with the cuts, and the 1995 budget in particular dealt with the cuts of the then Liberal government under Prime Minister Jean Chrétien and the Finance Minister Paul Martin, when so many programs were gutted in order to deal with an economic downturn. And in particular, I won't go into this too much, but we noticed the biggest cut ever in the history of this country in terms of health and social policies. But less noticed, and by the way, that was to a tune of about $6 billion, and we are just now beginning to catch up. Just now beginning to be back where we would have been back in 1995 without even considering the cost of living, increase in the cost of living. Less noticed than the areas of health and education was the move by the federal Liberals to actually exit the field of housing completely, leaving Canada one of the only countries in the advanced industrial world that does not have a national housing policy. And that's an embarrassment. What we have said in this budget is that, in fact, there must be a return to a national housing policy. And while we acknowledge the small steps taken by the Conservatives and by this government, we are very worried, in fact, that the amounts themselves are so small as to perhaps not create the critical mass needed to turn around a deteriorating housing situation in this country. And, in fact, that the monies available once more require matching contributions by municipalities and provincial governments at a time when either they are already stretched to the limit, or at a time when, in fact, some provinces have started to make investments, like my own. The Manitoba NDP government in Manitoba has started to make significant investments in, I shouldn't say start, has been over a long period of time, been making significant investments in housing, and desperately needs the federal government at the table, not negating or minimizing the work that's already been started, but supplementing and complementing that work. So it's really critical, in our view, that in fact the monies that are available for housing, however small they may be, are there without necessarily requiring matching contributions by provinces and municipalities. You should know, especially when it comes to the area of social housing, where you know, many, as you know, commended the government for beginning a small step towards covering social housing by the federal government. But if you look at the amounts, I mean, we're talking about hardly the tip of the iceberg being addressed in terms of social housing needs in this country. And you've heard from, I hope you've heard from social housing coalitions about the importance of this area and just how minimal this is. So it's equally more important in that context to ensure that that money flows freely to support and complement provincial and municipalities, not to impose further restrictions on them. In the case of the Manitoba NDP government, we are working actively to in fact try to advance housing when it comes to people living with mental illness. And there are some projects underway, and it would absolutely, but yet there are so many bigger needs and more needs. So it would be absolutely counterproductive for the government to come forward with a proposal that says, you know, that money that you've set aside for that project dealing with housing for people with mental health problems has to be included in your overall amounts. Doesn't make sense when there is such a huge need. So again, this recommendation is a way to actually speed up the investment of money in housing, so it's not hampered and tied up by municipal requirements and provincial government planning, but in fact can flow quickly without all that bureaucracy and paperwork, can ensure that not only are housing needs met, but stimulus is actually a result. We actually stimulate the economy because we've moved quickly and expediently to address what is considered to be one of the most fundamental issues in terms of the present recession, or what some would call an economic depression already. So, Mr. Chairperson, this is, I don't know how much you've heard from my colleague before me, Tom Mulcair, and you've heard lots, so I hope that I'm not repeating any of the arguments. I hope that, in fact, I hope the Liberals understand the importance of this amendment, because, in fact, they bear some responsibility for, A, the cutbacks to housing in the first place, and secondly, you know, they have expressed a desire to see the money flow quickly and not to repeat the pattern of the past, which is, as they've acknowledged, you know, 95% or 96% of federal investment dollars not flowing, not being spent. So here again is another way to make sure that that happens, to make sure that we meet a very serious need as quickly as possible. And I can tell you, coming from an older neighborhood, the north end of Winnipeg, housing stock has, in the 12 years that we've seen, that I've been around, and I've witnessed the cutbacks of the federal Liberals, and now the very slow movements of the Conservatives, housing is deteriorating rapidly. We're talking about old housing stock that needs that needs a rapid insertion of funds to help homeowners repair homes, to help nonprofit housing corporations build new homes, to help organizations involved in the Aboriginal community, the disabled community, people dealing with people with mental illness, all of those, and seniors in particular, all of those groups need to have access to these funds. The provincial governments, in many cases, are ready to work with those organizations. There's goodwill in terms of the federal, provincial, and nonprofit communities, and I would hope that we can advance this money and these issues as quickly as possible. And I hope that the federal Liberals, especially, will recant their past sins, and in fact now agree with us that it's time to work together to develop a national housing policy, and the way we do it is by spending this money, this what some would consider a paltry amount of money, spending it and getting housing stock revitalized and our economy stimulated. Thank you. I hope that's been a fulsome explanation of my amendment. Did you miss me?
Very fulsome here. Thank you. Thank you for your intervention. Are there any further? Seeing nothing further. NDP 5.
Mr. Murphy?
I abstain on this motion.
Mr. McKay?
Abstain.
Mr. Pachetti?
Abstain.
Monsieur Carrier?
Contre.
Monsieur Laforêt?
Contre.
Miss Washley-Shirley?
Oui.
Monsieur Bernier?
Contre.
Mr. Decker?
Against.
Mr. Cramp?
No.
Mr. Menzies?
No.
Mr. Wallace?
No.
Okay, the amendment is defeated. Clause 312. Shall Clause 312 carry? The NDP asked for a recorded vote on every clause.
Okay. Mr. Murphy?
You're in favor.
I'm in favor of that.
Mr. McKay?
In favor.
Mr. Pachetti?
Yes.
En faveur.
Monsieur Carrier?
Non.
Monsieur Laforêt?
Contre.
Miss Washley-Shirley?
Contre.
Monsieur Bernier?
Yes, yes.
Mr. Decker?
We.
Mr. Cramp?
Oui.
Mr. Menzies?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes.
Okay, that's carried. Clause 313, we have NDP 6. Ms. Washley-Shirley, you'd like to move that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairperson. I move that Bill C-10 in Clause 313 be amended by replacing line 6 on page 290 with the following: except those requiring contributions from other levels of government, a sum not exceeding $200 million.
Okay, the amendment is in order. Would you like to speak
Thank
to
you.
that?
Well, Mr. Chairperson, nowhere is the matter of inadequate housing so clear than when it comes to seniors. I'm sure all of my colleagues around this table have heard from our valued senior citizens members who feel that housing is not there when they need it. Nowhere is there more of a requirement to invest in housing than when it comes to seniors. So this amendment deals specifically with the housing issues that I've raised before, but specifically deals with the matter of senior citizens. So I would like you just to remember that in the budget and to look at page 133 of the Conservative Canada's Economic Action Plan, where it refers to housing for low-income seniors, where it says that, in fact, investments are needed and have to be cost-shared with the provinces and the territories. So again, Mr. Chairperson, we're going to put in place an unnecessary roadblock. We're going to slow down the flow of this money at a time when it's critically needed, when senior citizens living in poverty, and I am not saying all senior citizens live in poverty, I'm saying some of the greatest poverty we face as a nation is among our senior citizens who have given so much to this country. In fact, some of the greatest poverty rests with our veterans who have made sacrifices for this country. So it seems to me, if we honor those people, our seniors who built this country and our veterans who fought for us, then we ought to at least ensure that money is available when they need it for quality housing. Why do we allow for any kind of a bureaucratic process to slow down the flow of this money? I would hope that my colleagues from the Bloc and the Liberals would agree with this, at least. They may not have agreed with other amendments, but here is something that hits so close to home in terms of people who deserve to be treated with respect and who deserve prompt government action, who have waited a long time for the federal government to say, yes, let's get involved in housing to some extent. In fact, I remind my colleagues around the table that after the Liberals abdicated this field of housing, period, the only housing money that flowed between the federal and provincial and municipal governments came as a result of Bill C-48, which, as you will all know, was the legislation pioneered by the NDP, which diverted money, billions of dollars from corporate tax breaks to areas like housing, urban transit, Aboriginal communities, the environment. And so the only money that has flowed from the federal government over the last, I don't know how many years, of any substance and significance has been that money. So provinces have tried to invest that money, have tried to put it in trusts, have tried to spread it out, and have said very clearly to the federal government, we need the support of our federal partners on housing, especially when it comes to seniors housing. We have huge lineups and waiting lists, whether we're talking about independent living arrangements or supported arrangements. And that kind of situation has to be met on an urgent basis. And so by specifying that we do this in accordance with Treasury Board rules, we are, and in accordance with this, the plan laid out by the federal government, whereby it has to be cost shared with provinces and territories, we're cutting off our nose to spite our face. We're denying the very people we set out to help and that this budget was supposedly there to do, which was to help people at times of need. And who is hurt more than anyone else in times of economic recession? Elderly, people with disabilities, the poor, those who don't have huge savings to withstand the economic blows of the present times, those who don't have who have been hurt by some of these fraudsters out in the marketplace, ripping off people and seniors, as we're talking about in the House right now as we speak, the whole question of whether or not we need a National Securities Commission. So here we have an opportunity to act. Here we have an opportunity to flow the money quickly. I would hope that my Liberal friends at least will support us on this one. I know that they're propping up the Conservatives. I know that they've succeeded 50 votes in favor of Conservatives. I know they don't seem to blink when you sing happy anniversary to them for their 53rd vote in favor of Conservatives. And I know it's hard for them, and they're holding their noses. And they're doing it out of political expediency, not for the good of this country. We know all that. But surely, on this one issue, they could at least support something as rational and progressive as this measure, which would be to allow money to flow quickly to senior citizens and to meet the housing needs, which in turn will help stimulate the economy. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson.
Thank you.
I hope I've made my case effectively.
Thank you. We'll have the vote on NDP 6 then.
Mr. Murphy?
I abstain.
Mr. McKay?
Abstain.
Mr. Pachetti?
Abstain.
Monsieur Carrier?
Contre.
Monsieur Laforêt?
Je suis contre.
Miss Washali-Shalich?
Yes. Wait.
Monsieur Bernier?
Contre.
Mr. Dickert?
Against.
Mr. Cramp?
Against.
Mr. Menzies?
No.
Mr. Wallace?
No.
Okay, the amendment is defeated. The vote is on Clause 313.
Mr. Murphy?
Je suis pour.
Mr. McKay?
Aussi.
Mr. Pachetti?
Oui, en faveur.
Mr. Carrier?
Contre.
Monsieur Laforêt?
No.
Miss Washley-Shelley?
Hold.
Monsieur Bernier?
In favor?
Mr. Deckard?
In favor.
Mr. Cramp?
Yes.
Mr. Menzies?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace?
In favor?
Okay, Clause 313 is carried. Clause 314, we have Amendment NDP 7. Ms. Washley-Shelley, the amendment is in order.
Thank you. I'd like to move that Bill C-10 in Clause 314 be amended by replacing line 17 on page 290 with the following: except those requiring contributions from other levels of government, a sum not exceeding $25 million. Now, Mr. Chairperson, you will note on page 290 of Bill C-10 that this is the clause that deals with housing for persons with disabilities. A matter very close to my heart and for which I could wax eloquently for hours, but I won't. I will keep this down to a few minutes, but I do want to emphasize it because it is a very, very serious matter. I want to just say what my colleague from the bloc just reminded me that I should help explain what the amendment actually does. And what it does, in fact, it takes out that sentence which comes in the way of the rapid flow of money to the policy or to the group in question, in this case, people with disabilities. It takes away the words "in accordance with terms and conditions approved by the Treasury Board," because those are the words that, in fact, allow the government to continue down this path of demanding that the money be cost-shared, or that the money available be met equally by provincial or municipalities. And we have argued from day one that that is inappropriate on all counts. We have referred to the past experience of the federal government on this matter of flowing money or allocating money for investment in serious infrastructure and other programs, only to see the money not flow because of all of these requirements of matching funds and bureaucratic red tape and federal government interference. And the Liberals have said that is a major issue. They're the ones who have come to this committee and in Parliament said they've waxed eloquently about the failure of federal dollars flowing for infrastructure projects. In fact, they said themselves 90%, 96% in the past of federal dollars has not flowed. And I believe them, yes. My colleague Mike Wallace asked me, do I believe them? And I do believe them. Because, in fact, we've seen time and time again projects, good projects, sitting on the shelf, gathering dust, while the need keeps growing because of all of these requirements. And what we're simply saying is let's allow the money to flow. Yes, set broad conditions. Obviously, set conditions when it comes to the targeted group that the policy is directed to, in this case, people living with disabilities, for which the need is huge and who feel totally left out of the government's plan to deal with the economic recession. They acknowledge there's been a few steps taken, some important programs, but nothing that meets the needs at all of people living with disabilities. I don't know about my colleagues, but I've had all kinds of letters. Maybe it's because I am the critic for persons living with disabilities in my party, but I have had all kinds of letters from individuals actually saying, how is it that in this budget, you know, a middle class or wealthy person can go out and get money to build a deck on their cottage, but I can't get my home retrofitted to make it accessible for people with disabilities? Or how come I'm, living basically from hand to mouth in totally deplorable housing conditions, in a rooming house, with no standard of care, with no proper, decent living conditions, and there are no programs for me to access. So the issues are real, and people living with disabilities are more than, it's like I made the case with seniors, are more vulnerable than most people at times of economic recession. They haven't got the savings. They haven't got the backing. Many of them don't have relatives around looking after them. They're on their own. They fall between the cracks. And it is time, and the small steps that are taken in this budget are not to be dissed. They're important. I don't think they're nearly enough. I mean, if you look at the amounts on page 136 of the government plans, housing for persons with disabilities, 25 million in the first year, 50 in the next, 75 in the next. So it's pretty small potatoes in the scheme of things. But it's better than nothing. But then to have that tied up in red tape without certainty that will flow, and to have to require it be matched, doesn't make sense. Why then, at least, if where will the flexibility happen? How will it happen? If a provincial government like Manitoba is engaged in a particular project dealing with housing for people with disabilities, because they've had the vision or the fortitude to move in that direction, they've made it a priority, and along comes the federal government and says, we've got some money, but that project you already started, so you're not going to get any help. So why doesn't the federal government say, okay, province, you take 100, you pay for that, 100, you look after that 100% of the cost of that project, and we will look after 100% of the next project? Why not? Why not, to ensure that the money flows and we can get somewhere in terms of this big need? So I think I hope I've answered the question of the block in terms of what the amendment does. I hope I've made the case about how important this issue is. I hope that there will be support at least on this particular matter. It is critical, and it is important to remove these obstacles to the quick flow of money for housing needs of people with disabilities. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson.
Okay. We're going to call the question.
Mr. McAdam?
Abstain.
Mr. McKay?
Abstain.
Mr. Pachetti?
Abstain.
Mr. Carrier?
Contre.
Monsieur Laforêt?
Contre.
Miss Washley-Shalis?
Oui.
Monsieur Bernier? Sorry, Mr. Decker? Mr. Cramp? Again? Mr. Menzies?
No.
Mr. Wallace?
Against.
Okay, the amendment is defeated. The vote on Clause 314.
Mr. McAdam?
You're in favor.
I'm in favor.
Mr. McKay?
In favor.
Mr. Pachetti?
En faveur.
Monsieur Carrier?
Contre.
Monsieur Laforêt?
Contre.
Miss Washley-Shalis?
Contre.
Mr. Decker? Mr. Cramp?
Yes.
Mr. Menzies?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes.
Okay, Clause 314 is carried. We'll go to Clause 315. We have Amendment NDP 8. The amendment is in order. Ms. Washley-Shalis.
Thank you very much. I move that Bill C-10 in Clause 315 be amended by replacing line 28 on page 290 with the following: except those requiring contributions from other levels of government, a sum not exceeding $100 million. So basically, let me No, I have to explain this one because it's very critical, and you need to. My colleagues need to understand just how serious this issue is and why we're making the amendment. This is not frivolous or vexatious. We are simply trying to get the money flowing as quickly as possible. However small or paltry it may seem in terms of overall housing needs in the North, the little bit of money that is here for the North has to flow quickly. And I would hope that you'll all talk to some of your colleagues from the North to know how important that is. I had the privilege, actually, this summer of I can't speak from experience from the Yukon or the Northwest Territories, but I had the privilege of traveling throughout Nunavut this past summer. Iqaluit, Pond Inlet, Pengerton, and Resolute. And you know, if there's one observation my colleagues and I made from that absolutely incredible voyage was the need for immediate injection of funds in housing. I wish I could give you a slideshow of the housing conditions and just show you how difficult the circumstances are for folks. You probably heard, I'm sure my colleagues on the Conservative side have heard from their Minister of Health, the member from Nunavut. And they appreciate the money, and I know there was a big fanfare, big announcement made this past week. The money that is part of this budget has already been announced, obviously. Fine. Go ahead and announce it. But you know, after all the hoopla and after all the press coverage, maybe it would be a good idea just to flow some of that money without obstacles, without matching funds, without requirements that the hard-strapped governments of the territories, Yukon and Nunavut, have to match the funds. I just received a letter from the folks that we had met with in Iqaluit about housing, saying if you can do anything, get this money going. Our territorial governments our territorial government in this case does not have the wherewithal. It's stretched. They put that money into housing. You can't expect them to take the money to simply take the money that's available to require it be spent on a project already committed, as opposed to something new that the province or territory wants to see happen. How in the world, when it comes to the North, can we be this blind to the need and this caught up in red tape and bureaucracy? I don't know how to impress upon my colleagues the need in the North. I assume you've all seen it or heard from colleagues or understand it. Then surely you understand that in the North, where the climate is difficult, where housing is so critical, when the temperatures can drop so low, when the climate is so volatile, that we at least provide immediate flow of money for housing in the North. I don't know how to make this point. I don't know how the Liberals can sit here and not support this. I don't understand how this isn't driving people to action. Look, we're only looking at the Yukon and Northwest Territories receive $50 million each and $100 million for Nunavut for housing that is in a crisis. A housing situation that is reaching crisis proportions, and where there is no more apparent need for, no greater apparent need for social housing than in the three territories. So for goodness sakes, if you talk about the distinctive needs of the territories, as this document does, then treat it with distinction. Treat it as distinctive. Flow the money. Flow it quickly. Don't put in place roadblocks. Don't put in place these requirements. Do what's right. I implore my Liberal colleagues to do that. I hope the Bloc will support it this time. And maybe my Conservative friends, who probably have talked to their colleague, Leona Agugla, and realize the significance of this issue, will support this motion because it's that important. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll call the question on NDP 8, Amendment 8.
Mr. McCallum,
Abstain.
Mr. McKay,
Same.
Mr. Pachetti,
Abstain.
Monsieur Carrier,
Contre.
Monsieur Laforêt,
Je suis contre.
Monsieur Mulcair,
Pour.
Monsieur Bernier,
Contre.
Mr. Decker,
Contre.
Mr. Cramp,
No.
Mr. Menzies,
No.
Mr. Wallace,
No.
Okay, the amendment is defeated. Shall clause 315 carry?
Mr. McCallum,
We say?
Yes.
Mr. McKay,
Yes.
Mr. Pachetti,
Yes.
Monsieur Carrier,
No.
Monsieur Laforêt,
Contre.
Monsieur Mulcair,
Contre.
Monsieur Bernier,
Yes.
Mr. Decker,
Oui.
Mr. Cramp,
Yes.
Mr. Menzies,
Yes.
Mr. Wallace,
Yes.
Okay, clause 315 carries. We'll have vote on clauses 316 to 320. I don't have any amendments for those.
Mr. McCallum,
Yes.
Mr. McKay, Mr. Pachetti, Monsieur Carrier,
Contre.
Monsieur Laforêt,
Contre.
Monsieur Mulcair,
Contre.
Monsieur Bernier, Mr. Decker,
Yes.
Mr. Cramp,
Yes.
Mr. Menzies,
Yes.
Mr. Wallace,
Oui.
Okay, those clauses carry. We go to clause 321. We have amendment NDP 9. Mr. Mulcair, you can move it.
Mr.
It is in
Chairman,
order.
we're going to move back to 317, even though our first amendment in the section on navigable waters is, our first amendment proposed is 321. We will be calling for a vote par appel nominal, a recorded vote on 317, 18, 19, and 20 before going to 21.
We've already voted for all of
Oh,
those.
sorry, missed that one. Keep going.
Okay, so NDP 9.
9 is at 321, Mr. Chairman. It provides that lines 11 to 24 on page 294 are to be deleted. Those lines, as you can see from consulting them, are as follows. Despite Section 5, a work may be built or placed in and over, under, through, or across any navigable water without meeting the requirements of that section if the work falls within a class of works or the navigable waters falls within a class of navigable waters established by regulation under Section 13. Continuing on from there, the work shall be built, placed, maintained, operated, used, and removed in accordance with the regulations or with the terms and conditions imposed under Section 13. And finally, Sections 6 to 11.1 do not apply to works referred to in Section 1 unless there is a contravention of subsection 2. It goes on, the portion of subsection 6.1 of the Act before paragraph A is replaced by the following, and then that's the end of the English amendment. Essentially, Mr. Chair, this is the heart of the Conservative attempt to gut the essence of the Navigable Waters Protection Act. This is a statute that we've had the benefit of in Canada for over 100 years, and essentially what we're doing here is we're opening up completely to ministerial discretion the possibility of excluding classes. Now, what's particularly pernicious is that there's no explanation of what the details of that would be. Now, this is interesting because historically the Conservatives have always pleaded that parliamentarians should know when they're coming before a parliamentary committee what the actual shape of the regulatory changes would be so that they know what they're voting on. Now, of course, that's obviously a principle that applied to the Conservatives when they were in opposition, but no longer applies to them when they're in power. Because we see here that the possibility is going to be enacted, if this goes through, to remove all protection for navigable waters because we have no control over what the shape, scope, size, relative importance of those exceptions would be. So they're asking for a blank check. Of course, they're confident that because it's their guy who's getting the blank check, no foul. But we don't view it that way. We think that the Navigable Waters Protection Act has been there for a reason, that Canada has done relatively well compared to a lot of other countries. in terms of protecting its waterways. We've been anything but perfect. We've had serious problems, especially in the southern part of this country. But all things considered, I can talk for the state of things in Quebec. There are over 5,000 rivers in Quebec. As incredible as it might seem, there are over 1 million lakes in Quebec. Canada possesses an extraordinary richness in terms of the world's freshwater reserves. We have close to 1/5 of the world's fresh renewable water, although some people contest the definition of renewable in the sentence that I've just spoken. On the world stage, we're very lucky with regard to fresh water, and a lot of analyses lead people to believe that we might be heading for a time when, because of global warming, because of demographic changes, and increased desertification, we might be heading for a time when water will become increasingly important to be protected. That's why it's so galling to see the Conservatives, backed by the spineless Liberals, removing this protection for Canada's water courses. It was interesting to be here last night. It was a shame. I'm sure that there was no untoward intention on the part of the Conservatives, but it was a shame that it was between 8:30 and 10 last night that all of the environmental groups who were in here to speak against this atrocious attempt to remove protection of Canada's navigable waters was discussed. But what was interesting is that there were about 200 people in the hall, representing everything from canoeing and kayak associations to people who work as waterkeepers and people working on rivers from across Canada. But most of them were from Ottawa, from Toronto. A lot of them from this province where we're in right now of Ontario. But people across Canada share the concern of what the Conservatives are up to here. So essentially, we would delete the lines in question, the lines that would provide this new rulemaking power that would essentially give a minister, especially the one who's there now, the ability to simply gut the protection that's provided for navigable waters in Canada. Donc, Monsieur le Président, on est en train...
So, Mr. Chair, 321, Clause 321 in Bill C-10 should be amended by deleting lines 11 to 24 on page 294. And I'll explain here that we're talking about 5.1. That would be added to the Navigable Protected Waters Act. And in fact, we're talking about the protection of the navigable waters. It's not the Navigable Waters Act. And the Conservatives want to add this Clause 5.1, and we want to suppress it. And it says, despite Section 5, a work may be built or placed in, on, over, under, through, or across any navigable water without meeting the requirements of that section if the work falls within a class of works, or the navigable waters falls within a class of navigable waters established by regulation or under Section 13. The work shall be built, placed, maintained, operated, used, and removed in accordance with the regulations or with the terms and conditions imposed under Section 13. Section 6 to 11.1 do not apply to works referred to in subsection 1 unless there is a contravention of subsection 2. So, despite Section 5, and we should look, therefore, at Section 5, and this is the heart of the Act, and it's a general provision that prevents the building of a work in, on, under, through, or across any navigable waters with the Minister's prior approval of the work in sight or the plans for it. So currently we have a system in Canada where it's very general protection for navigable waters, and through the addition of 5.1, the proposal is to eliminate this protection by giving an unrestricted power to introduce exceptions. In other words, to completely remove the notion of protection that has existed for the past 100 years for navigable waters in Canada. Mr. Chair, we find this scandalous. We think it's scandalous because we have to look at it in the context of other information that has come through over the past few weeks where there is a clear intention. And what's interesting here is that the government, the Minister of Transport, who was here before this very committee, Mr. Baird, did not seek to deny it. And there has been information that has come through. And Mr. Francourt was the first to report it in Le Devoir on the front page of that newspaper, and the federal government intends to also go and play with the Environmental Act. And the goal here would be to change the thresholds. And apparently, from now on, any infrastructure of less than $10 million would no longer need an environmental assessment. And this is completely absurd in terms of the environment, because obviously it's not the value of the infrastructure that is important in such instances, but rather it's the impact that they would have on the ecological, environmental situation. For example, if you have a wetland and you're putting in a $9.9 million structure, this changes nothing. If you're really affecting the wetland in question, this is completely erroneous. But this is the Conservative vision, so we have to look at what the Conservatives are preparing to do with the assistance of the Liberals, given the lack of principles. They're looking. Well, we have a plateau, and we've hit what's called the economic crisis. And so they've hit this plateau, and they're going to ensure there's a smorgasbord for all their conservative
des dispositions qui vont à l'encontre
friends. And instead, they should be ensuring equal pay for equal work. So what are they going to do? They're going to attack us in union rights. So they're going to take away the right of employees to ensure collective bargaining. And they're going to say, well, if we don't deal with the economic crisis, then we're headed for ruin. It's a disaster given the current economic situation. So as a result of this economic crisis, they're using it as a reason to bring forward their far-right program with the support and the complicity of the Liberals. Then they are attacking the environment. And this is what we have before us now, in saying that there is an economic crisis. And there have to be infrastructure projects. Last night, we had a senior official who came to make a political speech, and he said,
c'est que c'est pas prévu là-dedans.
but this isn't scheduled. It's not set out in the amendments that we have before us here. So the public service is telling us that the senior officials within the government are aware of what's coming, and the elected officials who are supposed to be here to determine the laws of this country are kept in the dark. And the Conservatives, when they were in the opposition, they just kept on beating their hands on their chests and saying the government has too much regulatory powers and we don't know what's going to be in the regulations. How can we vote on this? Really, their war cry was that they didn't know what was happening, and yet this principle hasn't followed them into government. The Liberals don't have any principles, but they never did. When they were in power, they did the same thing. Now that they're in the opposition, they're supporting the Conservatives. But we are going to stand up, Mr. Chair. We are going to stand up in opposition of these conservative excesses that are trying to take advantage of an economic reality to ensure that all of their programs can get through, all their far-right programs can get through against women's rights, equal rights, against the environment, against future generations, against the rights of unionized workers, against the unemployed, against the most vulnerable members of our society, against all of the things that have been built for decades in Canada. And they're in a minority government position, but the Liberals are too weak to stand up. So the amendment, the first that we're proposing to the Navigable Waters Protection Act, is something that seeks to restore the protection that has always existed. It's very general, and to ensure that we do not give somebody who is not a member of Parliament as such, but who is acting like the arm of the government, of the executive branch. So We are in Parliament and we are acting today. We are acting as legislators and we are entitled to know what is here, what is in this. With regard to the government's real intentions, no parliamentarian worthy of that name can support this Conservative amendment, since we know, since last night, that the senior officials within the government know more about what the government intends to do than parliamentarians do, and I find this unacceptable. And I have expressed my full disagreement with this, and I hope that other parliamentarians will vote with us against this clause in order to try to restore the aspect of protection in the Navigable Waters Protection Act. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Listen, last night we took part at the same meeting with the groups that use navigable waters in Quebec and Canada, and it's quite clear that what came out of the discussion was that this bill should have been excluded, completely excluded from the budget. And I fully agree with my NDP colleague when he says that the budget is being used to push through ideologies and ideas that absolutely have nothing to do with the budgetary process. It's quite clear that given the fact that this part should not have been in the budget, well, it's clear that we will support this NDP amendment that seeks to restrict the scope of the changes that are being proposed. So it would have a very negative impact if applied, and I think that the amendment would ensure that we could avoid at any cost making the minister or giving the minister full powers and allowing him not to consult and listen to the public and the people who are in fact using these navigable waterways. So we are in favor of the NDP amendment.
Okay, thank you. We'll vote on NDP 9.
Mr. McKay?
Abstain.
Mr. Pachetti?
Abstain.
Monsieur Laforêt?
En faveur.
Monsieur Craig?
En faveur.
Monsieur Mulcair?
Pour.
Monsieur Bernier?
Non.
Monsieur Blanet?
Je m'oppose, Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Cramp?
No.
Mr. Stanton? Mr. Wallace?
Okay, the amendment is defeated. We'll vote on Clause 321. Shall Clause 321 carry?
Mr. McCallum?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. McKay?
Yes.
Mr. Pachetti? Oui. Monsieur Laforêt?
Non.
Monsieur Craig?
Non.
Monsieur Mulcair?
No.
Monsieur Bernier?
Oui.
Monsieur Blanet?
Oui.
Mr. Cramp? Mr. Stanton?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace?
Oui.
Okay, the clause carries. I have clauses 322 to 326. No amendments. Oh.
I'm going to request, given the importance of this particular section, that we go article by article and we call a recorded vote for these two articles leading up to the next amendment, which is 327. So there'd be 3 or 4 articles, but I think it's important enough.
22.
Okay. Mr. McCallum?
Yes.
Mr. McKay?
In favor.
Mr. Pachetti?
Yes, oui.
Monsieur Laforêt?
Non.
Monsieur Craig?
Non.
Monsieur Mulcair?
No.
Monsieur Bernier?
Yes.
Monsieur Blanet?
Absolument.
Mr. Cramp?
Yes.
Mr. Stanton?
Oui.
Mr. Wallace?
Okay, Clause 322 carries. Clause 323.
Mr. McCallum?
Yes.
Mr. McKay?
Yes.
Mr. Pacelli?
Oui.
Monsieur Laforêt?
Non.
Monsieur Craig?
Non.
Monsieur Mulcair?
No.
Monsieur Bernier?
Oui.
Monsieur Blanet?
Oui.
Mr. Cram?
Oui.
Mr. Stanton?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace?
Oui.
Okay. Clause 323 carries. We'll now vote on Clause 324.
Mr. McCallum?
Yes.
Mr. McKay?
Yes.
Mr. Pacelli?
Oui.
Monsieur Laforêt?
Non.
Monsieur Craig?
Non.
Monsieur Mulcair?
No.
Monsieur Bernier?
Oui.
Monsieur Blanet?
Oui.
Mr. Cram?
Yes.
Mr. Stanton?
Oui.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes.
Okay. Clause 324 carries. We'll do Clause 325.
Mr. McCallum?
Yes.
Mr. McKay?
Yes.
Mr. Pacelli?
Oui.
Monsieur Laforêt?
Non.
Monsieur Craig?
Non.
Monsieur Mulcair?
No.
Monsieur Bernier?
Oui.
Monsieur Blanet?
Oui.
Mr. Cram?
Oui.
Mr. Stanton?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes.
Okay. Clause 325 carries. Clause 326.
Mr. McCallum?
Yes.
Mr. McKay?
Yes.
Mr. Pacelli?
Yes.
Monsieur Laforêt?
Non.
Monsieur Craig?
Non.
Monsieur Mulcair?
No.
Monsieur Bernier?
Oui.
Monsieur Blanet?
Oui.
Mr. Cram?
Yes.
Mr. Stanton?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace?
Oui.
Okay. Clause 326 carries. Clause 327, we have Amendment NDP 10. Mr. Mulcair.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Alors, la modification numéro 10 proposée.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. NDP 10 is the other side of the previous amendment. We're trying to avoid having a situation where the minister can have too broad a discretionary power, which would allow him to take away any meeting from an act that is supposed to be designed to protect navigable waters. If we refer to Clause 327, this is an enabling clause which would allow the regulatory authority to introduce a number of regulations to implement. So 12.1 states that the Governor and Council may make any orders or regulations that the Governor and Council deems expedient for navigation purposes respecting any work to which this part applies or that is approved under the plans in sight of which are approved under any act of Parliament or order of the Governor and Council, and make regulation prescribing the fees payable to the Minister and so on and so forth. And then it adds, establishes classes of works or navigable waters for the purposes of subsection 5.11. So we see what's going to happen here. We're going to allow, under this enabling clause, to get the protection that existed formerly in the Navigable Waters Protection Act, and we're going to throw it in the garbage. And the garbage can is going to go into the navigable waters, and there'll be nothing we can do about this.
Provision of the statute, Mr. Chairman, and at the present time it provides that the Governor and Council may make any orders or regulations that the Governor and Council deems expedient for navigation purposes respecting any work to which this part applies, or that is approved or the plans in sight of which are approved under the Act of Parliament or order of the Governor and Council, and may make regulations, and it prescribes a certain number of subjects with regard to fees, with regards to any grants or suspension of approvals, prescribing the periods, respecting notification requirements. But here's what's new, and this is what's so preoccupying for us. Establishing classes of works or navigable waters for the purposes of Section 5.11. Now, as we saw before, Section 5.1 is the move that the Conservatives are putting on the Navigable Waters Protection Act to gut it, to remove all meaning of navigable waters protection in Canada, because what it's going to do is it's going to set up these categories, and here we're saying that it's the Governor and Council. So Minister Baird, the Minister of Transport, will arrive with lists of sizes of projects and all sorts of things that will no longer be subject to the protection of this Act. He'll have that rubber stamped by his colleagues around the Cabinet table, and that will become the law. Because what people sometimes don't realize, we evoke the notion of laws and regulations as if they were the same thing. Actually, what we're doing here today is we're looking at the overall framework of the law, but the detailed application of the law has to come in the form of regulations. Now, what's interesting is when the Conservatives were in opposition, they used to rail against the fact that all too often, as legislators, we were being asked to pass bills where the substance was going to come in the form of regulations. Well, the difference is the law sets out the large picture, the regulation gives the detailed application. Here, what they're doing is they're adding a new power for regulation making. But in this case, exceptionally, the regulation making is actually going to amend the substance of the Act. Because if you look at what I just mentioned before, the other headings in the Section 12, you know, that's the normal type of thing that you do by regulation, right? You prescribe fees, you know, how much it costs to make this demand or this request. You say how long it's going to be enforced, things like that. That's the type of detailed application that you don't normally trouble Parliament with. You give a regulatory power to somebody to take care of that stuff. But here, the regulatory power isn't to prescribe fees or look at a time limit. Here, the regulatory power is actually to go in and eviscerate the law. Take out any real meaning in the statute for the protection of navigable waters. That's what's being granted here as a power. And last night we had an officer from the department before us explaining that as far as he was concerned, it's because we were building in a new tiered approval process. Those were his exact words. Well, if you look through this, you won't find a tiered approval process. So obviously the senior bureaucrats have already decided what we're going to do. They're taking it for granted. I find that a bit offensive in terms of respect for our institutions. I think that parliamentarians are actually the ones who get to decide what goes into our statutes and what happens. And I also believe, and I've always believed it, and I've been both in government and in opposition, I've always believed that parliamentarians had a right to know the substance of what they were being asked to vote on. Here, we're being deprived of that right, because the substance of what we're being asked to vote on, we don't know. We don't know what's going to be in an eventual regulation adopted under Section 12, under this new paragraph E. We simply don't know what the classes of works that are navigable waters for the purposes of the new Section 5.1 will be. That's this new exception section. We don't know what it is. Apparently, the bureaucracy knows. We don't. I find that offensive. Monsieur le Président, d'habitude, la loi.
Generally speaking, Mr. Chair, the Act sets out the most important rules on the subject in question, in this case, the protection of navigable waters. So until recently, in Section 12, there were a number of things that could be determined by regulations, the fees respecting the grant of and cancellation of approvals and so on. Those are the type of details that don't come before Parliament as a whole. These are details of the implementation of an Act, and that can be done through regulation. So we often speak in the same breath about acts and regulation. The acts is what Parliament do, but in the case of regulations, there is delegated authority for determining the implementation details. That's what we are talking about an enabling provision here. This provision sets out the classes of subjects for which new rules can be set. But what is most concerning is that a new power will be set to establish at large, without limit, the classes of works or navigable waters for the purposes of subject 5.11. It's the clause that we just looked at that says that despite Section 5 in the Navigable Waters Act, a work may be built or placed in, on, over, under, through, or across any navigable water without meeting the requirements of that section. That is the new system that the government, that the Conservatives are in the process of setting up. The successive sincerity of Conservatives in this regard is constantly amazing to us, Mr. Chair. I've never seen people who are, when they're in the opposition, say one thing, namely that it is unacceptable for legislators be called upon to vote on acts when they don't know the details of them, and then when they're in power, they accept just anything from the government. I find this most disturbing. Yesterday evening, fortunately, we had a lawyer, Maître Hamas from the University of Ottawa. We had others with the waterkeepers from Toronto. If we didn't have those two legal experts here yesterday evening, I think that the government would have managed to do what it's trying to do, because they sent in someone from the department to say, we really don't see a problem here. A planted question from one of the Conservative MPs yesterday evening, will this change the ability of people to take their canoe on the Ottawa River? That was the question that was asked. I'm not making this up. The not surprising answer was no. Now, with respect to the Conservatives, there was no problem, so you had to be there. But unfortunately, between 8:30 and 10 o'clock, people couldn't appreciate this to its proper extent. A very colorful anecdote from an agricultural producer in Ontario who said that the Draining Act of Fisheries and Oceans Act, the Draining Act comes under provincial jurisdiction. Fisheries and Oceans had nothing to do with that. And what was on the table, or what we had to be talking about, is strange. It was an anecdote that someone had told them. No one had said that the Navigable Waters Protection Act was really a problem. So these are the arguments put forward by anecdote. And they can be done without any basis. And that's what they used to go forward. But fortunately, we had groups with us, groups who are concerned about navigable waters, who saw through the Conservatives' game. And they were doubtless alerted by the fine work by Mr. Francoeur in the Droit, who sounded the alarm first about the intentions of the Conservatives with respect to the environment. What we have on the table and their environmental concerns go together. So there is here a serious impact on the ability to construct. And don't think that behind that there aren't some developers, that there aren't some mayors of municipalities, and I'm not taking anything away from them. Most of them are very dedicated people, but let's be quite clear. A mayor tends to see a wetland as a failed attempt to broaden his or her tax base. That's the fact of the matter. So, to date, there was a federal act which prevented abuse. And I want to take 2 minutes just to speak about that, Mr. Chair, to put a pin in the Conservatives' balloon. When they say that all of this is because it takes too much time, that this apparently would have something to do with some idea of speeding up the process, of making it more flexible, whatever, that there are too many environmental approval processes. When I was the Quebec Environment Minister, I often had to deal with exactly that argument. I remember with the leaders of Hydro-Quebec and my former Quebec and Natural Resources, that was the common statement. That's what's blocking our projects, all these environmental considerations. I wanted cases. I didn't want anecdotes. And they brought forward a couple of. We got out the books. We went and looked at the process for the entire project. It took 6 years. The environmental assessment process, 3 months. Obviously. The social approval of the project, the analysis of the impact on the ecosystems, the engineering work, and so on. That's what takes most of the time. But let's look at the context in which we find ourselves. We are giving future generations a huge debt because we're coming forward with a budget. That's what we're looking at here. We are putting forward a budget that will have a huge financial debt attached to it. Future generations are going to have to pay it down. So rather than being even more cautious with the environment, rather than doing everything we can to build long-term things that will be able to be a benefit to future generations, we're giving the debt and we're scrapping the environment. It's the antithesis of sustainable development, which is the obligation placed on our generation to comply with the rights of future generations to experience what we've experienced. We benefit from a Protection of Navigable Waters Act. The Conservatives, with the support of the Liberals, are going to scrap that protection. That is the scandal that we have here. And we're right in the heart of the matter here. The section, the clause in question, this is the crux of the issue. This is what's going to allow the Conservatives to gut the Navigable Waters Protection Act.
Not only are we leaving a massive debt on the shoulders of future generations, because the budget that we have before us, of course, as you know, is providing for a huge deficit, the biggest deficit since the last time the Conservatives were in power, but it's also taking away from future generations their right to have a clean environment like ours. That's the essence of sustainable development as expounded by Gro Harlem Brundtland, that we have an obligation towards future generations to make sure that their standard of living, the place where they're living, their environment, how they're living is no less favorable than the one that we've enjoyed. Here we have to be doubly careful because we are shoveling onto their shoulders a heavy financial burden for the future. They're going to have to pay off this debt. I don't know about you, but I'm going to be long retired before this thing ever gets paid back. But at the same time, we're taking away the clean environment and the protection of navigable waters that our generation has enjoyed and generations before us. So it's doubly scandalous what's on the table here today, Mr. Chairman. And I hope that if they don't believe in anything else, we know that they don't believe in union rights, we know that they don't believe in women's rights, but perhaps there's a faint beating heart in one of the Liberals who's going to be called upon to vote on this, Mr. Chairman. We know that the Conservatives don't give a hoot about the environment, but there was a time when there were at least a few people in the Liberal Party, even if they never did anything about it, were able to talk a good game on the environment. So let's hope that as this article, this enabling provision that will enable the Conservatives to gut navigable waters protection in Canada, let's hope that there will be one Liberal with a conscience who will actually stop for one vote being a member of Her Majesty's official abstention, and remember that they're supposed to be Her Majesty's official opposition, and actually screw up the courage to do the right thing, to protect future generations' right to have the same environment that we've been able to enjoy, and to vote against this nefarious amendment, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Monsieur Laforêt.
Monsieur le Président,
Mr. Chair, in supporting this amendment, I would say that this amendment, which seeks to strike out Clause E with respect to establishing classes of works or navigable waters, what strikes me in this provision of the Navigable Waters Protection Act, we would allow the government or a minister to have extraordinary powers for establishing not just classes of works, which could be excluded from the coverage of the Act, but also to establish navigable waters. So I think they're playing with this clause in two ways, and what Mr. Mulcair was saying, namely that this is the crux of the attack on the Navigable Waters Protection Act, I very much agree. We're going to allow a minister to establish both the class of work but also the class of navigable water involved. It's a small provision, but it is very significant, and we'll be voting for the amendment. We're ready for the vote on NDP 10.
Abstain.
Monsieur Craig?
Abstain.
Monsieur Craig?
Oui, faveur.
Monsieur Laforêt?
Je suis pour.
Monsieur Mulcair?
Pour.
Monsieur Bernier? Monsieur Blanet?
Greffier.
Mr. Frank? Mr. Stanton? Mr. Wallace?
Against.
OK. L'article 327 est-il adopté?
Is clause 327 carried?
Appel nominal?
Mr. McCallum?
Oui.
Mr. McKay?
Oui.
Monsieur Craig?
Non.
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 Monsieur Laforêt?
Contre.
Monsieur Mulcair?
Contre.
Monsieur Bernier?
Pour.
Monsieur Blanet?
Oui, pour, Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Cramp?
Yes.
Mr. Stanton?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace?
Oui.
Adopté, c'est à 3. Merci. Là, on va à l'article 328.
Now we'll go to clause 328. It's NDP 11. Mr. Mulcair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And clause 328, which is on page 298 of the bill. Bill C-10 in clause 328 would be amended by replacing line 17 on page 298 to line 4 on page 299 with the following. So that's 13. That would be that would have been added would be then eliminated. Basically, section 13 would be repealed. The minister may so basically, as I mentioned earlier, there would be a rubber stamping, but if it's the minister, by order, he could then by order establish clauses of work or navigable waters and impose any terms and conditions with respect to the placement, construction, maintenance, operation, safety, use, and removal of those classes of work or works that are built or placed in, on, over, under, through, or across those classes of navigable water. An order is not a statutory instrument within the meaning of the Statutory Instruments Act and shall be published in the Canadian Gazette within 23 days after the day on which it is made. So, Mr. Chair, we're talking here about something huge. This clause is doing something significant because in Clause 2, even if they have no principles, the Conservatives who are sitting around this table should at least listen, because there's something huge happening here. In Clause 2, it says, 2A, it's not an order is not a statutory instrument within the meaning of the Statutory Instruments Act, because a statutory instrument says there should be a period of time in which the public would be consulted and have time to react. And here it says that it shall be published in the Canada Gazette. And I don't know why they said it in the way that they have said it in the Canada Gazette, but it's the official document. I think Alexander Kovacs had made a correction here in Ottawa 25 years ago to this effect, but in fact it shall be published in the Canada Gazette within 23 days after the day on which it is made. Mr. Chair, let's look at what they're doing. Not only are they trying to do it in an underhanded way, but they're just going to give the minister, through an order, the power to continue to remove the protection aspect from this legislation. But the Conservatives will also say that it's not a statutory instrument. That is, the order is not a statutory instrument within the meaning of the Statutory Instruments Act, and therefore the public And that's what the minister will be doing, is that the public won't even be consulted. And 23 days after the minister makes the order in question, this will be published.
This series of dirty tricks that the Conservatives are trying to foist upon Parliament here, not only have they taken it upon themselves to provide order and council powers, so regulatory instruments that will actually have to go through Cabinet and are subject to the Statutory Instruments Act, but here they've gone a step further, and it's reprehensible. The minister will have the power under proposed Section 13 to establish by order classes of works or navigable waters. So he could exclude vast categories of rivers that are right now covered and protected by the Navigable Waters Act. And what's even more shocking, it's unbelievable what they're up to here. It says in Section 13 that an order under subsection 1 is not a statutory instrument within the meaning of the Statutory Instrument Act. That means, in clear language, so that the people following us can understand, Mr. Chairman, that the public will not even be allowed to know what's in the order. Now, I heard the brilliant and talented Mr. McKay say that nobody's listening to us. No, he's mistaken. Nobody's listening. Nobody's listening when they're speaking. Nobody's listening when they're speaking, Mr. Chairman. But actually, it was quite interesting last night. There were several hundred people here. And what I learned, because a lot of these people in Ontario, you know, they're left-leaning, they have an ecological vision of the world, they're socially open, and what a lot of them told me last night is, until last night, they used to vote Liberal. They used to see the Liberal Party as being slightly left-leaning, even though they've got a right-wing guy now who they've gone and hired away from the States. He spent, what, 20 years in the States pretending he was British and 20 years in Britain pretending he was American, right? So for the Liberals, that makes him a great Canadian Prime Minister. It's quite something. But now that, you know, people are starting to see that the masks are falling, that the Liberal Party doesn't even carry the word liberty in its name anymore, because on things like women's rights, on things like union and social rights, they're just not there. So here, Mr. Speaker, we're looking at the ability of the government to take out everything that is essential in the Navigable Waters Protection Act and allow the minister by order, an order that will not even be published. So that under the Statutory Instruments Act, there used to be a rule that you had to publish and allow public consultation and people could react to the rule that you were thinking of putting in place. Here, the public won't even get to see that rule until 23 days after the date on which it is made. Can you imagine? This is the stuff of, pure stuff of banana republics, Mr. Chairman. And the Liberals, once again, are going to vote with the Conservatives to remove the right of future generations to know the same level of environmental protection that we've known over the years. That's the scandal of Section 13, and that's why the NDP is proposing its removal from the statute, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Merci, Monsieur Mulcair.
Thank you, Mr. Mulcair.
The NDP Amendment 11.
Mr. McKay?
Abstain.
Monsieur Laforêt?
Et pour. The brilliance of the speech.
Monsieur Mulcair?
Pour.
Mr. Wallace?
Against.
Mr. Menzies?
No.
Mr. Kremp? And
No.
Mr. Blaney. Monsieur Blaney.
Je suis contre, Monsieur.
Defeated
4-2.
4-2. 4-2. Merci. Okay, now we go to clause 327 to 320 to 396.
Article 327, the amendment was just defeated on.
Yeah, but it wasn't amended. It wasn't amended. Okay, we'll do it, but we don't have to. It wasn't amended. 327 was defeated. Yes, but I said 327 to 395.
excuse me, we've just received some other amendments.
Un instant, s'il vous plaît.
Moment, please.
Je veux juste voir. I think if you started with the chair, I think that would help. Alors, je peux-tu avoir une copie?
May I please have a copy?
Très précis. 380.
Greatly appreciated. 393. It's the same thing? Okay. So 327 to 392. Standing vote, recorded vote.
327 to 392 carried.
Yes. Thank you.
Recorded vote has been asked by Mr. Mauclair.
Okay.
Silence, please. Thank you.
Mr. McCallum?
What is this?
Yes.
Yes. Mr. McKay?
Yes.
Monsieur Crête?
No.
Monsieur Laforêt?
No.
Monsieur Mulcair?
No.
Mr. Cramp?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes.
Monsieur Blanet?
Oui, Monsieur Pagé.
Mr. Menzies?
Yes.
Okay. So, 6-3.
Les clauses adoptées 6-3. Okay.
6-3 passed.
Handed 3 amendments. I'll simply use the reference number 3685933, 3685689, and 365802. We haven't had much time to look at them, but from what I've been told is the fact that they are introducing new elements to the bill, they are not receivable. That decision is not debatable. If you would like, you can challenge the chair. Mr. Mauclair.
Question de règlement, Monsieur.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
There were 3, and the third one was in case you did rule that the first 2 were inadmissible. So what we were seeking to do was to include, after the Border Services Group,
Okay,
who were
Mr. Mauclair,
exempted,
the third one being which one? Just if you can use the reference number at the left.
33.
33.
So 89 and 02 would have, in their respective cases, would have given the same protection to persons who are employed as lawyers and who employer is in each case, the same treatment as the Border Services Group. In the second case, it would have been given to the Economics and Social Sciences Services Group the same treatment as the Border Services Group. These are the people who appeared before us last night, and who had explained to us that there was simply a slip-up, that they were being the only ones given this treatment. And the Liberal Party was interesting last night. It was Mr. McKay, in fact, who used the word sledgehammer and said that they had a legitimate grievance. So I'm quite convinced that Mr. McKay's been as anxious as we are to rectify that legitimate grievance. So if sections 89 and 02, if sections 89 and 02 are not acceptable, we propose to use section 33.
It's not debatable, but to appease you, because I am not, I can't answer the question. I'm just wondering if there's any official that can answer that question. Can I ask any official? If there seems to be an oversight, is there anybody? I think the question is valid. Yeah. 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 Can I get a lawyer to answer that? What? I did, but I think the question is valid because no, this is just for in terms of information. Sure we do. We're going to go.
Yes.
Yes, if you can just identify yourself, please.
Hélène Laurando, Assistant Secretary, Treasury Board.
Okay.
And I had a very quick look at the amendment, and I can confirm to the committee that there was no oversight on how the groups were described. There may be some claims by various groups, but the ones that are described currently in the Restraint Act are the ones that are properly described, and the exceptions only addressed to the Border Service Agency because they had a classification reform that needed to be implemented.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so Mr. Mulcair, the choice is, do you challenge the chair? Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes.
Challenge the chair.
The motion is that the chair's ruling be sustained.
Mr. McCallum?
Yes.
Monsieur Craig? Monsieur Laforêt? Mr. Mulcair?
Non.
Monsieur Mulcair. Excusez. Monsieur Bernier?
Sorry, oui.
Monsieur Blanet?
Oui.
Mr. Cramp?
Oui.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes.
Mr. Menzies?
Yes.
Congratulations.
I live to survive another day. Combien?
6 à 3.
6 à 3. Merci. Okay,
6-3, thank you.
so we go, shall clause 392? 393, sorry, to 395 carry. Wait.
Pour faciliter les travaux, je vais...
To facilitate the work, I'll say the same thing while I'm just asking the question, and that way the clerk can prepare. 393 to 395. 395.
Mr. McCallum?
Yes.
Mr. McKay?
Yes.
Monsieur Craig?
Non.
Monsieur Laforêt?
No.
Monsieur Mulcair?
Non.
Monsieur Bernier?
Oui.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes.
Mr. Menzies?
Yes.
Mr. Cramp? Monsieur Blanet?
Oui.
Okay, we're talking about NDP 12. Okay, sorry, carried 7 to 3, 7 à 3. We're on NDP 12?
Yes, clause 396.
Okay. NDP 12, NDP 13, NDP 14, NDP 15, NDP 16
17 is admissible.
will be ruled inadmissible because we're deleting lines in a clause, and it simply means that it attempts to delete a clause, and since in all these cases where is it? Yeah, no, because we're attempting to delete a clause, you're doing something that normally would be done by just deleting lines. By deleting a line, you're simply deleting a clause, and that is not admissible. So the amendments are ruled out of order.
Monsieur le Président,
Oh, this is it.
sauf tout le respect que je vous dois,
With all due respect, Mr. Chair, just a moment, please.
That was the word I was looking for. Oui, Monsieur Moutkat. Okay.
Yes, Mr. Mulcair. Well, would you please explain so that we can understand? Because I didn't understand a thing that you said. Well, in French, we can't delete lines if, in fact, we're deleting the entire paragraph first. So you can't indirectly do what you can do directly. So you can't do this. Well, listen, I am not questioning your decision this time, except to say the following. And what you've just said here, people will have to make the adjustments, because what you have said is the exact opposite of what people who helped us to prepare these things told us. So people are going to have to talk to each other, because as parliamentarians, we have some discretion. And I don't like the fact that a fundamental right of the elected officials be frustrated by an arbitrary decision. In fact, the people who helped us to prepare this said that it was possible to do this, and clearly the people who are working with you are saying the opposite. So it's somewhat frustrating to hear this, and I would ask you to speak and just to conclude, we're going to go clause by clause, and we're going to ask for a recorded vote on everything. Everything? Right to 447? Yes?
On vote 385?
Oui, 380. 385. Okay, 300.
396.
Okay, so Mr. McCallum?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. McKay?
Yes.
Monsieur Craig?
Non.
Monsieur Mulcair?
No.
Monsieur Bernier?
Oui.
Monsieur Blanet?
Oui.
Mr. Cram?
Yes.
Mr. Menzies?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes.
7-2. Okay, clause 396 adopted 7-2. Okay. For clause 397, anybody want to change their vote from the previous vote? Clause 398, does anybody want to change their vote from the previous vote? Clause 399, does anybody want to change their vote from the previous vote? 400. Clause 401. Clause 402. Clause 403. Clause 404. Clause 405. Clause 406. Clause 407. Clause 408. Oui, Monsieur Mulcair.
Mr. Mulcair, I just want to ensure the fact that you are going through the list of clause doesn't means that in the minutes of this committee, each person's name will be listed in the case of the Liberals as having voted with the Conservatives. Their name will appear. Is that correct? Yes. Then please proceed like an auctioneer. Go ahead. The paperwork will be completed after question period. 409, 410, 411.
414, 415, 416, 417, 418, 419, 420, 421, 422, 423, 424, 425, 426, 427, 428, 429, 430, 431, 432, 433, 434, 435, 436, 437, 438, 439, 440, 441, 442, 443, 444, and the forestry sector is now pleased with Mr. Mulcair, so we are going to go to 445, 446, and we are going to go to NDP 17, which is ruled admissible. Mr. Mulcair, I'm not sure if you want to speak to this, or we can go directly to the vote.
Oui, on y va, Monsieur le Président, merci.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chair. So the NDP 17 would amend C10 in clause 447 by deleting lines 13 to 17 on page 422. So lines 13 to 17 would say as follows. The portion of subsection 10.1 of the Act before paragraph A is replaced by the following. This Act, other than part in Roman numerals 4.1, does not reply in respect of subparagraphs of the following of the French version of the Act are replaced by the following. And the passage that is being quoted is in French only. So the text that is being read is in French only, and by the replacement on page 423 of paragraph subsection 10.2 of the Act is replaced by the following, ending on line 4 of page 425. So this is the Investment Act in Canada, which the amendment would mean that we would continue to maintain a level of protection of Canadian businesses that would be lost if we were to miss the boat with this change put forward by the Conservatives and being supported by the Liberals, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Question is on NDP Amendment 17. Monsieur Laforêt, you want to speak to this?
I would like the mover of the amendment to tell us a little bit more about the meaning of these amendments he's just introduced. Yes, Mr. Chair. One of the concerns we have with what the Conservatives are proposing about foreign investment is that we're weakening the system that was in place in the past. The level of eligibility of projects is being increased. Before, a review could be done at a certain level, and now that level is going higher, so that it's increasing difficult to review foreign investment, and something that may really concern people. There's the example of Air Canada. If we allow foreign interests to take the control of Air Canada, I'm not sure that a banker in Zurich or in Tokyo is going to be concerned a great deal as to whether Air Canada is still providing a service in Rimouski. So we think that the rules of the game are being changed and that is contrary to the interests of Canada. And we would put forward an amendment to remove the possibility that is seen in here, that is to reduce the protection that is already offered by existing legislation.
NDP 17.
Recorded
vote.
Mr. McCallum.
This is the amendment?
NDP
This is the
17.
amendment.
Abstain.
Mr. McKay.
Abstain.
Mr. D'Aliwa.
Abstain.
Monsieur Crête.
Faveur.
Monsieur Laforêt.
Pour.
Monsieur Mulcair.
Pour.
Monsieur Bernier.
Non.
Monsieur Blanet.
Non.
Mr. Cramp. Mr. Menzies.
No.
Mr. Wallace.
No.
Okay, that amendment is defeated 5-3. The vote will now be on clause 448 or 447, excuse me.
Mr. McCallum.
Yes.
Mr. McKay.
Yes.
Mr. D'Aliwa.
Oui.
Monsieur Crête.
Non.
Monsieur Laforêt.
Non.
Monsieur Mulcair.
Non.
Monsieur Bernier.
Oui.
Monsieur Blanet.
Oui.
Mr. Cramp.
Oui.
Mr. Menzies.
Yes.
Mr. Wallace.
Yes.
Okay, it is carried 8-3. We now go to clause 448. We have NDP Amendment 18. I do want to make a ruling on this amendment, and I want to be clear as to why I'm making this ruling. So I'm going to actually quote from the House of Commons Procedure and Practice. What this amendment does, and what all the amendments, the successive amendments from the NDP do from Amendment 18 to 35, is to seek to delete all the lines of the clause. And the House of Commons Procedure and Practice, page 656, states, and I quote, "An amendment is out of order if it simply attempts to delete a clause, since in that case all that needs to be done is to vote against the adoption of the clause in question. As members are aware, parliamentary practice does not permit to be done indirectly what cannot be done directly. Therefore, this amendment, Amendment 18, and all successive amendments until 35 will be inadmissible." I hope that's clear.
Ma question de clarification.
Clarification, if I might, Mr. Chair. In amendment number 17, could you look at that, please, the previous one?
Would you please take a look at
Yes. Yeah.
at section 17?
Amendment 17.
Amendment 17. Now, look at paragraph B. We amended clause 447 by deleting everything from line 9 on page 423 to line 6 on page 425. So for all intents and purposes, 2 full pages of text, right? So we just went through that. That was declared admissible by you.
That's
We
right.
just voted on it.
That's correct.
Now we're going to something that is 1 page long, and you're declaring it inadmissible.
And the
so you're going
reason-
to have to help me out.
I will do so. Because part of the clause was left in. The amendments 18 to 35 delete the entire clause, but Amendment 17, whether you did so intentionally or not, you did not delete the entire clause. That is why Amendment 17 is admissible and Amendments 18 to 35 are inadmissible. You cannot delete the entire clause.
Well, again, I'm going to.
So you can.
I'm not going to contest your ruling, but I will, because you're the chair of this committee, request that you clarify something for the parliamentarians that we all are, irrespective of our ideological and party differences. I will request that you clarify that with the people who are with you, not today, but for future reference, because the information and the instruction and the advice that we get from the people who are helping us prepare these things, who are also officers of this Parliament, is contrary to the decision you just made. So I'm not going to contest your decision because you're doing it in the best of good faith, and I have no doubt about that. And you're basing it on the advice that you're getting here. All I'm telling you is this, that as a member of this Parliament, I was given advice contrary to the advice you were just given. So I'd just like to have it clarified.
Okay. I'd be very willing to follow up with you, Mr. Mulclair, and seek to, find out who gave you that information. And we'll seek to rectify that in the future because as the chair, all I did was instruct the people that serve in terms to apply the procedures of the House to the ruling.
I'm not even contesting your decision.
Okay.
I want that to be
I
clear.
appreciate that.
I know that your decision is made in good faith, based on the advice you've just been given. My only point is, we've been given different advice.
Okay.
So let's clear it up for the sake of all of us.
Let's clear it up, and I'd be happy to talk to you about that after. So, as I see it, we have no further amendments. So we have from clause 448 until clause 471 without amendment. So we can have a recorded vote on clause 448 until clause 471.
Mr. McCallum? Yes. Mr. McKay?
Yes.
Mr. Dhaliwal?
Yes.
Monsieur Crêpe? Monsieur Laforêt?
No.
Monsieur Carrier?
No.
Think about it, though.
Monsieur Mulcair?
No.
Monsieur Bernier?
Oui.
Monsieur Blanet?
Oui.
Mr. Cramp? Mr. Menzies?
Oui.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes.
Okay. So until clause 471 is carried. So we have schedules. We have schedule 1 through 11, and I would group those together. We'll have a recorded vote on schedules 1 to 11.
Mr. McCallum?
Yes.
Mr. McKay?
Yes.
Mr. Dhaliwal?
Oui.
Monsieur Carrier?
No.
Monsieur Laforêt?
No.
Monsieur Mulcair?
No.
Monsieur Bernier?
Oui.
Monsieur Blanet?
Oui, oui, oui.
Mr. Cramp?
Oui.
Mr. Menzies?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes.
Schedules are carried. Shall the short title carry? On division? Okay. Shall the title carry on division? Shall the bill carry? Okay.
Mr. McCallum?
Yes.
Mr. McKay?
Yes.
Mr. Dhaliwal?
Yes.
Monsieur Carrier?
No. No. No.
Monsieur Laforêt?
No.
Monsieur Mulcair?
No.
Monsieur Bernier?
Yes.
Monsieur Blanet?
Oui.
Mr. Cramp?
Yes.
Mr. Menzies?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes.
Okay, it's carried to 3. Shall the chair report the bill to the House? On division or recorded vote? On division? Okay, thank you, colleagues. C'est tout. Thank you very much. Meeting adjourned.
Congratulations.